Today is May 8th, 2025. It is 9:42, and this is the Budget and Public Employees Committee. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderman Browning.
Present.
Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderman Devotie. Chair Aldrich.
Present.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderman Devotie. We have 3 present.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. With that, we have went through the roll call. There is no approval of the minutes for this week. We will approve the minutes from this week, next week, wrapped up in a big bundle. Shout out to our clerk, Miss Ora. I just call her Miss Ora. Because she's the one who in Budget Committee, we have very long meetings and it's a lot of notes taken, but just appreciate the staff and all the great work that they do. Board bills for review will be Budget Bill number 1, which we will continue to dive into. Today, there's no resolutions for review and for committee discussion today with Board Bill number 1, which is City 2006 FY budget. We will hear from the Fire Department, followed by the Board of Aldermen office, and then we will take a break for committee members, and then after that, we will hear from our police department. So with that, we'll dive right on in to make sure we're respectful of everybody's time, and we start with our fire department, which I believe we have our chief here to present the St. Louis City Fire Department's FY26 budget. Thanks for being here, Chief. Just state your name, make sure your mic is on for the record, and whenever you're ready, I think it's off. You just push that little button right there. It's nope. Yep.
Good morning, Chief Jankerson.
We hear you, Chief.
Pleasure.
Please proceed when you're ready. And for all the members, the drive for the fire department presentation that we're looking at, I said the drive. The presentation that we're looking at is also in your drive so that you could be able to see it. Last year, the chief provided us with an amazing annual review. That annual review we will be receiving very soon, hopefully in the next week. It's a lot of pages, and he's working to get them all printed out, but I'm sure if you want to get a quick snapshot of it, it's really in detail of the department, and they even go into ward by ward. But though the annual review will be coming to committee members soon. So with that, Mr. Chief, please proceed.
Correct. We'll have this to you hopefully by next week. It's going to multi-graph for printing, and as Alderman Aldridge alluded to, this is broke down by ward as well, so you can look at hot spots within your ward, things that are trending, that the fire department's seeing, whether overdoses, drug issues, vacant buildings. It'll all be in that report, and we should have it to you by next week. I did give a copy to the mayor yesterday.
Awesome.
Well, good morning. I'll be briefly discussing the fire department budget. As everybody knows here, the St. Louis Fire Department is committed to the preservation of life, property, and the environment by effectively and efficiently meeting with the emerging public safety and welfare needs of our diverse community. St. Louis Fire Department accomplishes its goals by maintaining the highest standards of professional service throughout continued training, education, and living up to the motto, the fire department's motto of always justifiably proud. There are 6 department sections within the fire department. You have fire prevention, fire suppression, administration, training academy, emergency medical services, and the EMS billing division. Our TO allots for 586 firefighters, 129 medics, and that's a combination of paramedics and EMTs, 33 dispatchers, and 32 support staff. The description on the slide, on the first slide, it says we have 59,000 annual fire responses. That is technically 59,000 incidents. Depending on the incidents, we have multiple responses, from a single fire truck to multiple trucks to ambulances and trucks. It just depends on what the call is. So on an average, the fire department handles about 100,000 responses per year. and that'll be in the annual report. It breaks it all down by district, by firehouse, by type of call. So that's all in there. On the EMS side, we handle about 56,000 annual responses for medical assistance. And you have to remember, the EMS side, we do not do transfers. In other words, from hospital to hospital, a hospital, nursing home. We do only 911 emergency calls. Go to slide 2, please. There we go. Okay, the budget request for fiscal year FY26 from the fire department was $75,154,741. The budget that's been proposed was $71,875,001. Most of our request overages was all personnel. Every year I ask for additional EMS personnel. Currently, we are approved to run 12 ambulances on a 24-hour period. And every year for the past 15, 16 years, I've tried to increase that because our EMS members are overworked. They run a lot of calls. We would like to see that increase to 18. The issues that every fire department is having right now is trying to find enough paramedics to staff the ambulances. There is a paramedics shortage. We are seeing it come back right now. I have a class in place right now of 14 paramedics, which will graduate in about 2 weeks, so that's going to add to our manpower. The FY26, the GEMT. The budget looks at $7.926 million. The GEMT is what's known as Ground Emergency Medical Transportation, and that's the money that the fire department receives back from the government for providing emergency medical services. It's basically a Medicaid reimbursement, okay? We run a lot of Medicare, a lot of Medicaid calls. So this provides for the training, the equipment, the upkeep, the hours that we use providing emergency medical, and that comes back into the city budget. Riverfront gaming, that's kind of remained the same for about the last 10 years. We're at $30,000. We use that primarily for all of our equipment that's used on the river. All of our boats, our training, our dive equipment, that's what comes out of that. We have been in discussions over the past several years, I'll say 4 or 5 years, trying to get that increased because the $30,000 comes nowhere near to covering the expenses that we have with keeping our boats repaired and the maintenance on them. Our boats sit in the water year-round, and during the winter when we have the ice flows, it really damages our boats. As an example, the Stan Musial, which is Marine Unit 6, which is our largest boat and largest fireboat, is in for repair right now, and to repair the 2 engines, we're looking at about $80,000. It's in dry dock right now, being repaired. We should have that back by the end of June, but keeping a marine fleet in service is a very expensive proposition. And as everybody knows, we are the second busiest inland port in the country, so we do need marine units. Public safety sales tax is a fixed part of the budget, $5.797 million. Let's get to the good page. Next slide, please. For the most part, as we looked at the budget that was presented back to us after we made our request, these were the parts of it that concerned us. These were some of the reductions that were put into our budget. At this time, like I said, we have 40-plus fire recruits going through training. They should come out the second or third week in June. We'll probably wait about 2-3 months and try and hire another 50 recruits. And once they graduate, we're still going to be about 30 to 35 down based on resignations and retirements. The protective clothing line item, 521518, was reduced by $175,000. And that money is tied directly to our recruit hiring. It cost me approximately $10,000 per recruit to have them totally outfitted in personal protective equipment, the self-contained breathing apparatus, or SCBAs, and all of the station uniforms that we have to initially purchase for them to become a fire recruit. So that's a pretty important line item for us that we really don't see. If we don't have that, that's going to be an issue, trying to move forward and purchase the firefighters' equipment. You have to understand that, pardon me, all firefighters have 2 sets of gear. If one set of gear gets contaminated at a fire, it immediately goes back to the station. They pull out their second set of gear. The first set gets cleaned, washed, and decontaminated. And the reason that's been a big push is because of all the cancer that's been involved with the firefighters recently. So we're very particular on how clean the equipment's kept and that they have a complete change to move into after a fire occurs. Second line, the 565-100, the healthcare services are reduced by $5,000. That is tied directly to our drug testing of members. That's the random testing. And based on last year's numbers, we expect to spend over $45,000 in 2025. So that's a number that needs to be looked at as well. Any questions so far?
We usually ask questions at the end, but I do got a quick one since you asked. So going to the protective clothing, you say recruits, does that mean that typically do these recruits become officers, or not officers, firefighters, or is this, they pass the, I don't know, physical test, the written test, and now they are in line to actually become a firefighter, or, yeah.
I'll give you the quick answer to that. Once they pass the written test, then they take a physical performance test. They get put on a list by the Department of Personnel. Then we do an interview with all of them. Yes or no, we hire them. Then they go through an 18-week academy at fire department headquarters. They have to get state certified in firefighter 1, firefighter 2, hazardous material operations. After that 18 weeks, they get assigned to a firehouse, and they have to have all their equipment. Then they have another 18 weeks of training to get their emergency medical technician's license. So we have them for 36 weeks. At the end of an 11-month period, they become full-time city employees. For 11 months, they're probationary.
Mm-hmm. So when do they get the protective clothing?
They get their first set of protective clothing as they start the fire academy, which we keep at headquarters. Probably the biggest expense, the breathing apparatus. Everybody shares the same backpack type harness, the SCBA, but every firefighter on the job now has to have their own face piece and their own regulator, so we don't cross-contaminate each other.
Have you seen, and I know this isn't like, what is it called, Fire on CBS or something, which I love watching that show, which I'm sure the work is actually a lot more harder. So during the, have you seen a lot of people, once you buy this protective clothing, drop off? Because I think we've talked about how intense the work is, either in, in the wintertime when it's super cold or in the summertime and they have all this gear on. Have you, I guess what I'm getting to with the protective clothing, have you seen yourself buying these protective clothing and then seeing a lot of people fall off or say, hey, I thought I was made out for this and couldn't do it?
Great question. Normally, we have too many people watching Chicago Fire.
Oh, it's a good show.
Which doesn't truly represent what the fire service does. It doesn't really show how difficult and down and dirty it is. Normally within about the first, I'll say 5 to 6 weeks of training, that's when many of the individuals who really don't have the heart for this job decide, no, this isn't for me. So we haven't expended too much equipment or cost on them initially. When they first come into the academy, the first 4 or 5 weeks, they're using recycled gear.
Got it, okay.
So we don't spend it right away.
Gotcha.
We want to make sure they haven't watched too much Chicago Fire.
Who know what I was going to do after the Board of Aldermen. The Chicago Fire was making me think like I was made out to be a fireman, so I guess I'll start watching Chicago Medical and see maybe if that works, even though I don't like blood. But
And I'll digress a little bit.
And then I have no more questions. You can proceed.
Okay, we will start, it's in the process now, where we will invite all the Board of Aldermen down to a fire training day where we will put you in gear and light some Chicago Fire type fires and have you experience what we do. But that is in the planning process.
And when you guys do that training, is that at the the amazing firehouse in the 14th where you do the training at the smokestack and, okay.
Yes, yes, up at Jefferson and Cass, but we will invite you all down for that.
Okay, I'll just take the selfie. I won't do the training, but go ahead, Chief. You can proceed.
Okay. Let me see.
Alderwoman from the 6th Ward has a question.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I will not point out, I guess I will point out that I have the only ward without a firehouse currently. Just by a couple borders, but that's actually not the question I had. Just wanted to check, you said that part of what you budget for are essentially Medicaid reimbursements. Do you see, and this, I know that there's kind of a shifting landscape, of course, with Medicaid and Medicaid coverage. Will that affect your department at all? Do you see any kind of impending issues with any changes in some of that?
Well, I've been watching it very closely. It's very difficult to predict where the changes are going to come within the administration up in Washington, D.C. This GEMT program has been around about, I'm going to say 5 years. There's only 8 states in the country that actually use the GEMT funding system. It's a long process to have it put in place. It is a lot of money to the fire department, to the city. It's part of a state program as well. It is in the state budget. That's how we get to the returns, if you will. But the ability to provide emergency medical care relies completely on the fire departments and the EMS departments of the country. So reducing this program is going to severely hamper the ability of cities to respond and take care of their citizens and the people who need the care. So I think it's a program that there might be some changes to it, but I think with the large cities that provide for the populations in the way we do, the way the city of St. Louis does, I think it's going to stay around for a little bit. There might be some changes, but I don't see it going away.
That's great to know. And just obviously, you'll keep us up to date as well as the mayor's office if any changes do happen. But just for at least for people who are just generally watching the news, are there particular things that we should be looking for that if they start to get cut, we should be worried?
We keep a pretty good eye on it and watch what they're trying to change, but the GEMT program is based on the amount of calls that you respond to and what it takes for that department to respond to it as far as the training, the equipment, the transportability. So we keep a good eye on it because we know it is a significant amount of revenue for the city, and we're not letting too much slip through our fingers, if you will.
Okay, thank you.
We'll keep you informed, believe me.
I know we're not at the point of kind of questions, typically what we do, but since we opened it up, I wasn't sure if any. Okay, Alderman Browning.
Thank you, and thank you, Chief, for being here. I want you all to have what you need to do your job, and so just keep in mind I'm asking this question in that context. You noted on this slide that your amount for protective clothing has been reduced by about $175K from the requested amount. When I'm looking at the line items from the previous couple of years, I see that protective clothing in FY24 spent about $427,000. In 25 requested and budgeted again for $550,000. But when I'm looking at what's been spent so far, less than half has been spent, only about 48% to the tune of about $264,000. So there's a good amount of money that went unspent last year, and I'm assuming we have 2 months left in the year. But again, I want to make sure you all have the clothing you need. But I'm just looking at the request here, and I'm wondering if the amount budgeted is not adequate because so far the previous years didn't spend the full amount.
Great question. In other words, it appeared that we had an excess early in the year. It took us a while, once we opened up. We had exhausted the past hiring list for probationary firefighters, so personnel had to give another exam. Okay, so they opened up the application period, and it was supposed to be open for 90 days. Then it got extended for another 90 days. So we ran into about a year of extensions before we actually got and received a certified list. So it took us, you're correct, we weren't able to spend the PPE money on new recruits because we did not have a list to hire with. Right now, we have a current list of about 350 total. We graduated a class about 6 months ago of 44 or 45 members. We immediately turned around and hired another class of 50. We're down to 42 right now. So that's almost 90 plus members we've hired in under a year, and we're going to need another class right away. So once we got the certified list from personnel, we started hiring and we started buying. This personal protective equipment is not off-the-rack type of equipment because of the different body styles, body shapes. We almost custom build certain parts of their coats and their pants. We did a study several years ago with some kinesiologists and also some exercise physiologists that were looking at the injuries we had on the fire department. And we noticed a lot of shoulder injuries. And that was based on how the coats fit, how the SCBAs fit on the back of the firefighters. So we went to a more trim type outfit that was fit for the particular firefighter. So that did raise the price a little bit. But the excess money in the PPE account was because we weren't able to hire. Now we're hiring, because even after this class graduates coming in June, I'm going to need another 40 firefighters right away to get us back up to the TO. So I hope that's the right answer.
Well, I think what we'd expect to see then is that as this year closes out, that balance will be reduced quite a bit, since you said you're hiring now, and then next year we'll look at, and I'm sure this is the way that the budget director approaches it too, is that he looks at what was spent in previous years and what was being spent this year, and whether you're going to use the full amount and whether we can rebudget stuff. So I'm just again asking because I want to make sure that you get what you need, and if we're looking at moving money around, I want to make sure we're aware of what categories we can bolster or remove things from.
Unfortunately, with our zero base budget, I don't get rewarded to be able to keep any excesses I have. I would love to do that because there's several accounts where we don't spend what we need to spend every year. If I don't have certain hazardous material type incidents, I won't expend money on replacing certain hazmat sensors that I need. That are very expensive, which is good. But if I don't spend $20,000 on 6 sensors, years I don't have the type of call, doesn't mean I don't need those. But like I said, I don't get rewarded for being fiscally responsible. Oh, look, you didn't spend it, so I'm going to reduce it again.
And you make an excellent point too, that year after year, the unspent money goes back into that surplus fund, and so it's not like you're able to just throw it away for, hey, we didn't hire these guys this year, but we hired them on the first day of the new year, and so we're just going to keep it and spend it then. That's not how this budget works, and so that's helpful for the public to know, and I appreciate you walking us through.
But we do try and encumber certain items that we know, okay, we're not going to need it. We look at shelf life of equipment, things like that. So if we know we're going to need it, we just had a meeting a couple weeks ago and said, okay, what do we have left in accounts? What are we going to need for the summer coming up is with parades, fairs, large events, because we expend a lot of medical equipment June, July, August. So we make sure those orders are in place and encumber accounts and make sure we are fiscally responsible with managing these accounts.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay, the last item on this slide was 560,000. That's a computer service that we're looking at, and that was reduced by $130,000. The fire department has become more software-centric, which I don't know if that's the correct term. I don't like the term, but we rely a lot on our software for everything we do in the fire department now, from dispatching to equipment control, equipment maintenance, fire truck maintenance, ambulance maintenance. All of our drugs are monitored by software now. Something as simple as watching a paramedic grab a vial of narcotics, that has to be tracked. So we have systems on the ambulances now where the employee enters an ID, it opens the safe, they grab the drug they need. As soon as they pop the cap, there's a RF identifier that notifies the computer that narcotic has been used and pulled. Also helps us with our inventory and our replacement. So this is all driven by software. The package that you're going to get next week that explains the fire and EMS side and what we've done all year, what we are looking to do the following year, that's all done with software, different software packages. And it allows the fire department to maintain a level of professionalism, to be able to do our reports, and be able to respond back to the federal requirements that we have to respond to. And part of our request this year was moving into this new, one of these new systems, which we are already using, but it comes with a substantial cost. And this one was $130,000 reduction. So the name of the program, we're looking at a system called IA Pro Suite implementation, which allows us to monitor almost everything we need to monitor on the fire department, from hours worked, training hours, professional standards. It just puts us at a level of, it's tailored for our fire services to allow us to look at our budgets, our responses. It also allows us to look at any type of complaints we've received, why we received them. You know, it helps us target inefficiencies within our service. So that was a big reduction, and that was part of a program that we really want to get online. So then that was a reduction, like I said, of $130,000 in the computer services. And everything we do now is computer services. Everything's tied to it. Let's go to the next slide, please. We do have some vacancies right now. Over the last 2 years, I haven't been able to promote any members of the St. Louis Fire Department. That's from deputy chiefs, battalion chiefs, fire captains, fire privates. On the EMS side, which I didn't put up there, like I said before, the paramedics are starting to come back in and replace. They're starting to graduate from the different paramedic schools. Forest Park Community College, we're starting to see higher graduation rates. So we're out trying to attract them to come to our department. We've had several pay raises over the years with the fire department and the EMS department, so we've seen the attraction, we've seen the recruitment efforts come back to us. So it's starting to work. It's going to take a little bit of time, but within the fire department side, as you can see the vacancies, and this is strictly because of a court case. And this is becoming a very dangerous, it affects my continuity of delivery. It affects my coordination of operations on the scene. So this is a very dangerous situation right now with this many vacancies at our officer level. So, next slide, please. We can't go without pie charts. This helps every, this kind of shows where most of our budget goes to. As you can see, almost 90% of it is totally personnel, fringe benefits, salaries. So that's what most of all of the city money goes to. 2% of our overall budget is supplies, which I think is a pretty surprising number based on all the fire trucks you see on the street and the equipment and the uniforms that we wear. Contract services, 6%. And other, it's going to be things we do around headquarters. We have a headquarters building now that was opened in 1989. It does need some updates, as well as some of our firehouses. I've got 30 firehouses in the city and 2 at the airport. The average age of our firehouses in the city is about 100 years old. So they need some considerable updates, which are going to be part of a capital budget, but they do require some assistance. Last slide. Just another breakdown of what part of the salaries go to. Benefits, overtime, EMS administration salary, it's, most of it is on the fire department side, 50%, 57% of the budget goes to the fire department side. We've got a total of about 880 members that work for the fire department. That's fire, EMS, and civilian employees. I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Chief. Starting in line of seniority, Alderwoman Sanye.
Thank you, Chief. Nice to see you.
Pleasure.
Happy to have you here this morning. First, I just want to acknowledge all the work that you all do in the fire department. I find that you guys are incredibly responsive, including sometimes just like following up, and residents are usually very curious when there are fires, what happens. You guys are usually really prompt, get back to me right away. And you also do a good job when you're on the scene with engaging residents, which I find interesting because sometimes they're very intense situations, but you still do a good job of, like, you know, keeping them at a safe distance, but still communicating with them so that they know what's going on. So thank you for that. Some of my questions you've covered already, but I specifically in your personnel and staffing matters, you did request more funding for regular employee salaries, what was ultimately being proposed in this budget. What positions, based off of the proposed budget, would you have to cut or would have to be reduced if what was in front of us is what passed?
Well, we actually run a fairly lean shop. You know, you look at our civilian employees, that we have probably one of the largest payroll in the city with fire and EMS. And you also have to understand that my payroll, I have 4 people who work in payroll. We run 3 different payrolls. We run a firefighter payroll, which is 24 hours. I run an EMS payroll, which is 12-hour shifts. Then I run a regular civilian administrative payroll at 8 hours. It's also broken down into 3 different pension systems and support systems. So it's a very difficult payroll system to put out. The people I have are very, very good. They're versed in, like I said, probably the most advanced and most difficult system in the city. And some of the pay raises that we requested over there were to make sure that they do stay with the fire department. Because once they learn these systems, they become very appreciated and hot commodities throughout the other departments in the city. So most of those raises are requested just to try and retain our personnel. The only additional personnel I asked for were members of the EMS side. I asked for additional paramedics. I also asked in my budget for 2 deputy chiefs on the EMS side. Currently, we used to have deputy chiefs on the EMS side. Those were cut out about 10 years ago. I still have people who are considered EMS supervisors who act at the deputy chief level. A deputy chief controls 2 shifts on EMS. There's 4 shifts total. So we have people acting in those positions, and I'd like to see them attain the rank of deputy chief and be paid for that. I believe in the actual budget, since there wasn't a deputy chief position, they were put under a paramedic chief spot, but it would actually be a deputy chief spot in EMS. So we were just trying to claw back some of the positions we lost.
And I also noticed that your budget is the overtime line item is pretty significant. Is that because of what you mentioned earlier about not being able to do certain promotions? And also I'm curious about, you know, what are the department's plans to not have such a heavy reliance on overtime?
That is the million-dollar question. There's several things that will allow me to reduce my overtime budget. 1, get my promotions. 2, continue the hirings, because like at one point we were almost 160 firefighters down, which caused the overtime. So with the classes graduating, and we're putting them through as fast as we can, once we get our TO back up, you will see a reduction in overtime. The other issue is the way that the city made changes are added to the family medical leave. Past administration, we added 6 additional weeks of paid family medical leave in addition to the 12 weeks that everybody receives or is allowed to receive based on the federal laws. The city decided to add 6 paid weeks that can be taken anytime as long as you had your family medical work paper in place. Now, if you take the 6 weeks and break it down for the fire side, firefighters work 24 hours. So their 6 weeks gets looked at and organized a different way. So if you take the 6 weeks paid, that breaks down to 13 additional paid days off. That has just destroyed our overtime, as it has with other departments. It's not just the fire department in the city. As I talk to other commissioners and directors, they've had the same issue. We have been discussing making a change to that program. As opposed to being able to take these additional 6 weeks of paid family medical leave anytime you want them, these should be put on the backside of family medical leave. In other words, you still get family medical leave, but you have to exhaust your medical leave, your sick leave, your vacation, and time off. And if you still need additional time, then you can go into that 6-week bank. That alone, let me find my exact number, so that I know you won't believe me unless I really give them to you. Now, this is just for the fire department side, not EMS. We average 3,687 hours per month of paid family medical leave. That's 5 firefighters every day that call in using this additional benefit. That's 5 overtime every day. So I got to pay the guy who took the day off, or the firefighter who took the day off, then I bring in an overtime guy. So I'm paying 2.5 times salary because of this paid family medical leave. And I'm not saying get rid of it, I'm just saying change the rules.
No, I appreciate that. I think we're this is the exact place to let us know that and to have that conversation. I think we've seen paid family medical leaves work in the disinterest of the operation of many departments in the city. I think there are many alders that are kind of aware of that and have observed those situations. So I think this is the right space to uplift that, because that likely could be a policy issue in discussion. So I appreciate that, and point well taken. Do you know, so just thinking of like that policy and thinking, I know you mentioned the city added 6 weeks. Do you know of how this works with other fire departments? Have you observed any other jurisdictions that might have given their additional sick time off? Is it that it's a problem that we didn't communicate with you all when we, did this policy and make it specific for your department? Or, I'm just curious, how have other jurisdictions dealt with this?
Well, I don't think it's...
I know that Alderwoman Velasquez will probably likely ask as well.
It's not specific to the fire service. It's government-wide. And I think the policy was set up with good intent. It was just somebody who is truly having some health issues. I have no problem with that. It was just the way it was rolled out. Just allowing somebody to go to their physician and say, I have a chronic pain in my back that might necessitate time off every once in a while, and then they sign up for the family medical leave. I get it, but you should have to use your own time. Whatever you've accumulated as medical leave, sick leave, whatever the case may be. And if it gets substantial to the point where you can't work and you've exhausted all your time and you still need a little more, that next 6 weeks comes on the very end, not up front as free days off. And other cities have moved it to the back.
Yeah, just for the sake of the committee here, and I think we should definitely talk. I would be happy to talk afterwards and have those conversations. I do think that's something that is on everybody's radar, is just reevaluating how this worked, because it's, like I mentioned, it's working to the detriment of many operation of departments. It's something that's not turning out well in many cases. My other question is around your health and safety equipment. It looks to be just pretty much the same every year, so I just wanted to make sure. I know you uniforms, but as far as like medical supplies or updating fire ground tools? It looks the same. So is everything sufficient in your budget for you to have the supplies that you need?
I'll say primarily yes, but we are watching some equipment and looking to maybe move some of the equipment to a different manufacturer and different distributor that has completely no tariffs tied to it. And we are watching that closely because we know some of this stuff, some of the equipment that we use might start seeing tariffs applied. So we are looking at that right now. And I can't completely answer where it's going to go, but we are looking at that. Okay.
And then I have a similar question for your training and professional development. Again, it looks like this line item is pretty consistent. I was curious if there are any specific programs or, certifications and just things of that, especially thinking of, I know you guys have regular standards like with fire and EMS that you have to meet. Just want to make sure that everything there is, you have what you need for any updates and to make sure that your staff have those opportunities to standards.
Quite a bit of our training it's all done online, so our certifications. We also have, over the past 10 years, trained our own trainers, so we're able to provide the classes in-house, if you will. Some of the other courses, the major courses like hazardous material, that's provided. We partner with the state. We have our own trainers, so we use our trainers to help train other fire departments, and we borrow from the other fire departments to help train some of our guys. So we're at a pretty comfortable spot right now. We just reduced the cost of some of our training software. It seemed like it was getting a little higher, so we went out to bid about 2 years ago and got a different provider, so that's reduced our cost. So we're always looking at the training and what it's going to cost us and can we reduce it. I will say that putting 3 classes through the training academy in about a 2-year period is a very expensive proposition. So, but we keep a good eye on our training, and we're about where we want to be as far as costs right now.
Okay, and then something that I found interesting in your budget is you actually don't have, I don't see anything, and I could be missing a line item, but I didn't see anything connected to capital outlay or fleet-related expenses. So I'm wondering, are there any equipment purchases or vehicle replacements that your department considers high priority but are unfunded?
Well, I wasn't sure I was going to be able to talk about capital budget. We have a capital budget that we put forward with the Board of Public Service, and we break it down into critical needs. And I think our critical needs, and I'll grab the paper, we're looking at about $2.5 million. Most of it was tied to some support vehicles we needed, and I'll get into vehicles in a minute. Some firehouse upgrades we needed. We have I think we have 8 or 9 firehouses that still have carpet in it from a 1993, 94. And the last thing you want to put in a firehouse with firefighters running around is carpet. So we've gradually been replacing everything with a commercial type vinyl flooring, but we've got 8 left to do. But the capital budget went to
BPS.
BPS.
But what about your fleet-related expenses?
Right now, we're in pretty good shape with our fleet. We just received 7 new pumpers, 2 new hook and ladders, which is the 125-foot trucks. We have another 107-foot hook and ladder on order, which would be here in about 18 months. We have 2 more pumpers arriving, I'm going to say, hopefully by October. We've got 10 ambulances on the way, which should start hitting in June.
Okay.
So we've done a pretty good job on staggering our requests for capital. The biggest issue we have with fleet, our fire trucks, our ambulances, is how long it takes us to get those built. Right now, it takes on the average about 2 years to build a fire truck. It takes about 18 months to build an ambulance. So with that, probably coming before the end of 2025, we're going to start putting in our requests for fleet because it's going to take 2 years to build it. So our fleet is decent. If I had to beg, complain, and ask, our reserve fleet. I have to maintain a certain amount of equipment in reserve to hold my standards, my ISO standards, and the ESD has had a difficult time keeping our reserve fleet up to speed because they've had a difficult time finding mechanics. So we're down probably 6 to 7 mechanics on the fire department side, which works under ESD. And that has caused us a concern with our reserve fleet. Last night at 5 o'clock, we had a pumper go out with a radiator problem, which seems like a simple fix, but they had to send it out to a third party to get it fixed. I was down to 0 reserve fleet. So that's a big topic. We need to keep our reserve fleet up, and that's all done with maintenance and repair.
Understood. It sounds like you guys have done a good job of just proactively planning, so that is great. Something that you mentioned in your presentation was drug testing. This is not directly tied to budget, but it is tied to personnel. Do you, are you guys having conversations on reevaluating your drug testing policy? We were having some conversations around that before, but then I think there were some other focuses kind of with the pension coming up and everything, but I was just curious, where are those conversations? Because I think what I was hearing is that there was maybe some interest in reevaluating your drug testing policy because it might have been, it might have been interfering. And I think especially in consideration of the fact that the state of Missouri recently legalized cannabis, I'm just curious about what you're thinking along those lines.
I have been in conversations with the mayor's office as recently as this week. I did talk to the director of personnel several times, the last director of personnel, Sonia Gray. We met many times on this. What we found is we were hiring and interviewing new firefighters. These were ideal candidates as we interviewed them. And before you come on the fire department, you have to take a physical, medical test, and a drug test. And we saw some, what I thought were good candidates who had failed the drug test simply because of cannabis. And as I've talked to other corporations who do a lot of hiring, a lot of them have eliminated the test for marijuana, THC component. And it was my opinion that for the initial drug screen, to think about eliminating that test for THC, for the cannabis part of it. Once we get them to the fire department, then we can invoke our standards and say, okay, from here on out, you can't test positive. The city did change their drug policy a little bit. Before, it used to be 1 strike on any type of marijuana and you got fired. Now it's 2. But I think for the initial test to get hired for the job, I mean, Barnes Jewish has changed it, SLU has changed it. So there's some big corporations that rethought this type of test. And there are certain positions where, yes, you can't have drugs in your system. And fortunately, the fire department's one of them, because we deal with narcotics and drugs all day long, so you can't have this in your system. But to initially get hired and go through the academy, I think it's an area that needs to be discussed and revisited. Once we get them, I can tell them, you're done.
Understood. I think any step forward is great. Eliminating it from the testing. I will say personally, I think marijuana or cannabis should be treated the same way as alcohol. I personally am not a fan of. I do think it would be a step forward, obviously, to eliminate it and allow people to still do the job. But I think just like if you drink and you're not on the clock, it doesn't matter as long as it doesn't interfere your work. I think we should have those same policies around marijuana. I don't like how people pick and choose which substances are okay. And I know you guys are EMS and first responders, so you have some other considerations. But I mean, alcohol does not necessarily, weeds, long-term impacts are not necessarily any worse than alcohol. So I'll just put that personal note on the record, but also would like to say, I'm glad you're having those conversations. I have heard of several people for EMS, for firefighter, and for police that are interested in the drug testing piece around cannabis specifically is a barrier to them. And it's really interesting because I don't know why anybody would go through you all's intensive training and then still test negative. But I think any step forwards there are good, and I'm glad those conversations are being had. My last question is around what you put in your presentation around just computer services and that it was reduced by $130,000. Could you tell us a little bit about what those computer services are for and how the department would be impacted if what was in front of us is what was funded?
Okay. The program that I was specifically speaking to was called IA Pro Suite. It allows us to look at our databases, efficiently join them, and then query or pull out what we need. As the technology and the software programs have come online, it's like we've been piecemealing this one and then this one and this one. So we're at a point now where we need to look at how do we combine these to more efficiently look at what the fire department does, to more efficiently manage our equipment, our manpower, our training. You have to understand that we have to abide, and we get checked regularly by what's called ISO, which is the Insurance Service Offices. And that rating affects the city by putting insurance levels at a certain rate based on the performance of the fire department. Right now, the city of St. Louis is at an ISO rating of 2, 1 being the best. 2 is where we're at now. Goes to a standard of 10. This allows us to coordinate everything we do and kind of have hands-on. As you well know, we broke ground several months ago on the new Public Safety Answering Center, which is going to be up at Jefferson and Cass. One of the big negatives in our grading schedule was not having a dispatch center coordinated, a PSAP. We broke ground, so we're going to move forward on that. So hopefully that's going to also assist us. But being able to take dispatch times and dispatch numbers and coordinate all that, that's what this software does. It helps us with that. It allows us to do case management of different type incidents we see in the city. You know, if we're trying to hotspot drug overdoses in one area, and all of a sudden that moves, why is it moving? So it just helps us coordinate manpower, equipment, purchases of medical supplies. It basically streamlines everything we have to report. Okay, and the other issue is we coordinate with 42 other fire departments around this area that are involved in the St. Louis region. So everybody's heard of mutual aid, where we work together, but we also try and coordinate if, say, Central County all of a sudden is seeing an increase in a certain type call, be it a fire, be it a drug. We'll be able to monitor that. They'll be able to monitor us and see, okay, we need to move equipment around to protect for the public. 2 Fridays ago, we had a Cardinals baseball game, we had a Blues game, we had a Battlehawks game. I think we had a concert going too. But anyway, all these people came into the city of St. Louis. You know, so we had probably an additional 500,000-600,000 people in town. We can pull assets and coordinate with other departments. Say, here, here's what we have going here. We might need assistance, and move it. So it's more of a regional coordination. And the fire departments do it all the time. We had that fire Friday and Saturday night downtown O'Fallon. We automatically get assistance from a county liaison who comes in and just, even though we didn't pull county equipment, we had one of their chiefs in town who was just like, okay, if you need something, just let, and he just stays at the fire with us. And we do it with them too. Once they hook a 3rd or 4th alarm, we send an individual out there to coordinate to make sure that we provide for the public. But that's what this stuff helps us do.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful to know. You all's reports have been helpful. I actually, when I was working on some in-house legislation, was able to talk to you all and get some information and data. It was a little hard to isolate some of it, but I was very impressed that you guys were able, I was able to see just go right into the system, run some things, get some reports, and we're able to kind of discuss what might have been connected to, the times you guys have to put fires out and it was from people squatting in the property, or, if it was a drug overdose because you went into a vacant building and found someone who had that. So, I would definitely support you all continue your reporting and even getting ways to isolate and get more specifics, especially around measures that the health department should be aware of, which is why it's at that time I was working with the health department and the Department of Human Services and those reports to kind of help them with some things, have some conversations with some things they were doing. So totally support you having the ability to do reports, and also would support you all being able to isolate some of your data, because I think you guys being first responders means that you're on the ground and you see things that many of us, and I'm very curious about, as the next 4 years, as housing is less built, as just things continue to happen and special social services get defunded, I would assume that it's going to have a strong impact on what you all do, because you're kind of a catch-all, and would love the ability to kind of see reports and see data to see more of those trends behind just like observations that we might see, but be able to use your reports as data point. Thank you, Vice Chair. I'm done.
All right, thank you. I think Alderwoman Saunier covered a lot of my questions, and for the record, Alderwoman, I agree that I think marijuana should be treated the same as alcohol. I think when we're trying to hire people in this city, it's ridiculous that we handcuff ourselves with outdated and frankly just non-scientific approaches to this stuff. I had just a couple questions. So EMS is combined with fire, and I think we know the importance of these jobs. I saw an ambulance pull over the other day, and a couple of people jump out and rush to the aid of some people at a car accident, and I thought, gosh, that's a tough job. They're constantly responding to people on the worst day of their lives, and that's just their every day. I understand that's going to be difficult to hire for a position like that, but thankfully there are people out there in the world that see that as their duty and see that as something that they get fulfillment from, and we're very grateful for them. I'm curious what your department has been doing to hire more paramedics and more EMS to make sure that we can fill those positions, understanding again the challenges that are out there, but can you just tell us a little bit of the efforts that you're doing to increase those numbers?
Well, I will say that the EMT is pretty stable. We can hire EMTs easily. That hasn't been a problem. Our paramedic hiring became a big issue during the COVID years, the 2 years of COVID, because every urgent access care, every hospital was hiring the paramedics, trying to put them in their area, because that's where a lot of people were going with the COVID type symptoms. So, across the board, across the cities, across the country, fire services lost our paramedics or other hiring opportunities. We also lost paramedics because of how sick they were becoming. They caught COVID as well. So a lot of them, based on how severe it got, determined, I'm done. So we lost a lot of them that way as well. Over the past several years, as we do monitor the different paramedic schools, Forest Park Community College being one of them, we've seen their roles inch up. So we are seeing them come back. The St. Louis Fire Department, EMS department, partnered with Columbia University, Boone County, and we started our own paramedic program within our department. They're about 1 year in. It's a 2-year program, and we're teaching that program right here in the city of St. Louis over at EMS headquarters. So we got that going for us. Paramedics and EMTs and firefighters did receive a substantial raise for what they're doing, so that assisted with our retention. We had a program going over at STEM Academy over on Kings Highway, as I know at the old O'Fallon High School, but now it's called STEM, where we had high school kids going through the EMT program, going through the Firefighter 1 and 2 program. So that was a way that we were pulling people over to become members of the fire department to work in EMS and the fire side. First year we did it, it was a really good program. This was back in 2014, anyway, I can't remember the year, but we had 18 students that graduated. All 18 students got college scholarships, so we didn't get any of them, but they all went to nursing school. So it was a good program that had good results, but it wasn't the results we wanted. Since then, we have had a few of them come back and start working for us. The last thing I really want to hit on with regards to paramedics in the EMS side is our paramedics see a lot of duty. They see a lot of calls. They see a lot of trauma. They are, within 2 years, they are some of the most experienced paramedics anywhere. They're the gold standard. So they get hired very easily by other departments. They get worn out rather quickly. You figure, the average ambulance is running 10, 15 calls a day. And these are traumas. It does wear on you. So retention is a difficult thing. My ability to retain is based on the ability to promote, provide an avenue for promotion so that they can see that they have the opportunity to move up within EMS. On the second side of that, the other thing that would, and I've had discussions with the director of personnel, the past two, the other big retention issue would be if I would be allowed to take an EMT who becomes a paramedic crew chief, offer them the opportunity to move over to the fire side as a firefighter paramedic. That would help with my retention tremendously. And have a fully integrated service. Technically, yes, I do run EMS, but I have fire and I have EMS. My firefighters are allowed to work on EMS overtime. But because my medics and EMTs do not have firefighter 1 or 2, they can't work on the fire side. To fully improve the retention and the ability to also recruit, if I had the opportunity to say, here's the progressive movement within the fire service, EMT, you'd start on an ambulance, EMT, paramedic, and then move over to the fire side as a firefighter medic.
And what's preventing you from doing that now? Is it personnel rules, or
It's probably personnel. It's probably also a combination of pay. But that would truly integrate the fire service in the city of St. Louis. And it would help us retain members tremendously.
So that's something that I think maybe once we have a permanent personnel director, might be a conversation to have with them.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I appreciate you sharing with us a little bit more about that. So when we're looking at the positions that were requested but unfunded, whether that's inventory control technician or human resources specialist, 6 EMTs, 6 paramedics, what do you think is the highest priority for your department at this time?
Paramedics.
Paramedics. Okay, appreciate that. Good, quick answer. That's my questions. I'll pass it back to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, for stepping in. Alderman Velasquez?
Thank you. My colleagues have asked a lot of great questions and stolen some of my questions, so I don't have too much to ask. Just a couple of clarifications, and just to put on the record, I also agree with changing the drug policy as far as marijuana goes. Is there any federal restrictions at all? Is it something that if we chose to do it, it wouldn't really impact funding or anything else?
It could. Some of the grant fundings are tied to certain restrictions. But to come on the job, the initial test, none that I know of.
Okay.
It would make sense. Like I said, they passed the physical part of it. They passed the medical part of it, and they failed that marijuana test. They've passed, they didn't have any amphetamines in their system, opiates in their system, so that's all clean. It's just the marijuana that affects them. And as we've established here, marijuana is legal.
Right, it's contradictory because it is legal, but it's right.
Correct. And normally, once they interview with me and the board that interviews them, we say, okay, we're going to hire you. They have to be tested normally within 10 days. And if they've had marijuana in their system, it's going to come out. So I'm just asking, the initial test, I think that needs to be looked at. Once we get them on the job, then it becomes, this is one of the things you have to give up if you want to be a firefighter or EMS member. That's just the way it is.
And then just another follow-up question to that, just because I don't know, is that a policy you all set? Do you need legislation to do that? Is that?
That'd just be our policy.
Okay. And then just last question for me, because we already talked about the promotion piece, but are you budgeted to fulfill those promotions? Like if you go through the promotion cycle,
I am.
is there money in the budget?
It's in my TO.
Okay. That's all the questions I have for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Velasquez. Quick question, Chief. When we started the presentation, you had mentioned it's hard for you to do promotions. And you had mentioned something like a lawsuit of what was, that why you wasn't able to do that. Could you go into more detail? Or is there, maybe you just can give some history of like,
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll try and keep it brief. It is a little bit convoluted. We had an established promotional list that was certified by the Department of Personnel. We have been operating on that list for several years, and 2.5, almost 3 years ago, at that time, the Director of Public Safety decided no more promotions from that list. And he wouldn't allow me to promote. And there was a settlement agreement that was brought forth by the Director of Personnel. At that time, it was Richard Frank, and the members of fire. And the basic statement on the settlement agreement that the current list would be maintained and promotions will be made off that list until a new promotional test would be given and certified by the director or Department of Personnel. So that's what we are operating on. And then the Director of Public Safety decided to freeze all promotions, saying and that was, at that time, Director Dan Isom. And his statement was that he wanted to look at the organizational structure of the department. That's why he froze it. And that's where we're at. We're in court right now.
Okay, and so hopefully there'll be some decision so that maybe figure out how to start moving people up in promotions.
I would hope. It's going to be a little bit more convoluted and contentious, if you will, because we had the old list, which they froze, and then we gave another promotional test for battalion chief and captain, which has not been certified yet. So I've got 2 lists right now.
Bless your heart. Okay. Not your heart, but the process heart. So, but you're the one that got to deal with it, and you do an amazing job. And I just want to thank you for being here today and presenting your budget. And I think you gave a lot of information, hopefully, that we can digest from this budget committee to try to be helpful in the process. So thank you so much, Chief.
And I'll have those reports to you hopefully next week.
Okay.
Our fire department report.
Okay. Okay. Any other last questions from the committee members to the chief? Seeing none, thank you so much. We'll be on the lookout for that report.
Okay, have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we are a little early, so depending on the committee, do folks want a quick 10-minute? I'm seeing it. All right. Madam Clerk, could we take so I think our new rules say I could do a stand at ease if it's 10 minutes, so we don't have to take a motion. Is that about right? Is that about right?
I didn't see the president and here, so obviously you're the chair. If you'd like us to stay, we can stay.
Is a quick 10-minute break okay? All right. So I'm going to make a motion that we stand at ease. I don't need a second for the stand at ease, only if I go to recess. Correct? Correct. I was hoping the rules, folks. So we'll stand at ease for 10 minutes and be right back. All right. The Budget and Public Employees Committee will resume, and we will start off with the Board of Aldermen's budget. Good morning, Madam President.
Good morning, Chairman Aldridge and members of the committee.
Thanks for being here. There is something I want to mention. On day one, when we kicked off this budget committee, I mentioned several departments that was helpful from the mayor's office to Mr. Coleman and Ms. Smith, and Ms. Smith from the 9th Ward and Mr. Heskamp from the 14th Ward. But I forgot to mention your office also being helpful in this process. So I just want to thank your office for being helpful to the budget committee to make sure that departments and things are flowing with the schedule that we created in a very short time. So thank you for that support, and whenever you're ready, you can present your budget.
Wonderful. Well, that's what we're here for. So happy to help. So I want to start by providing a brief overview of the Board of Aldermen for the public, followed by some key highlights from fiscal year 25, and then I'll conclude by discussing line item changes for fiscal year 26. The Board of Aldermen, as you know, is the legislative body for the city of St. Louis. The board creates, passes, and amends local laws, reviews policy matters, and passes the city's annual budget, like we're doing right here. City residents elect one alderperson from each ward in the city, as well as the president of the board. The board is made up of 15 elected members, 14 representing individual wards, and the president, who is the one at-large elected member. During the 2024-2025 legislative session, the board introduced 182 board bills and passed over 147 pieces of legislation, including updates to the St. Louis Fleet Streets Policy, establishment of a rental registry, charter reforms such as Prop V, which increased fine limits for vacancy, and Prop T, which created the Department of Transportation. And for a second year in a row, we got a balanced budget to the mayor's desk. As you may recall from last year, the board selected a meeting management software system that has worked over the, and our team has worked over the past year on implementation and finalizing that contract. And I'm proud to say that we expect to go live in the next coming weeks. So city residents can expect more accessible communication through better organized agendas and more up-to-date meeting information. Additionally, following full implementation of the meeting management software, during fiscal year 26, we also plan to evaluate community engagement software. So my office will update the board members and the community about the project in the coming months with additional details as they are made available. Today, the budget my office is presenting reflects the financial planning and priorities for fiscal year 2026. The proposed budget indicates a focus on maintaining and enhancing the services provided to the public while managing costs effectively. Some key points. So overall, our total budget for fiscal year 2026 is proposed at $5,493,651, which is a slight decrease from the fiscal year 25 adopted budget, which was $5,608,537. This decrease indicates a careful approach to financial management, again, amidst some changing needs that we have for our city. The largest segment of the budget is personnel services, and this is proposed at $5,141,335 for year 26, which is a slight increase from the $5,015,634 adopted in fiscal year 25. This category includes salaries, benefits, and other employee-related expenditures. Regular employee salaries are budgeted at $3,598,210, an increase from $3,500,659 in fiscal year 25, and this increase is due to the board staff receiving the 3% pay increase that other city employees have received as well. The total expenses for employee benefits, including FICA, retirement plans, and health insurance, show minor fluctuations, but generally indicate a decrease compared to fiscal year 25. Medical insurance is budgeted at $486,030, which is down from $498,680 in fiscal year 25. The budget for materials and supplies has also significantly decreased from $126,000 in fiscal year 25 to $38,000 in fiscal year 26, which marks a reduction of almost 70%. This indicates a reduction in non-essential spending and the completion of internal projects approved by the Personnel Committee. For example, line item 520000, computer supplies decreased as the board replaced outdated computers, laptops, and monitors for Board of Aldermen staff during fiscal year 25. Similarly, line 520500, office supplies, saw a decline as we do not anticipate overspending in the office supplies account in fiscal year 26. And last line item 522000, facility and ground supplies, has been set to 0 for this year. This category contractual and other services is where we see a few other changes. This category experiences a nearly 35% decline, decreasing from $443,000 in fiscal year 25 to $288,408 in fiscal year 26. This reduction reflects a review of completed projects for the board, including the Badget Pass access system, which recently got completed to provide safe access to the board, and the Civic Clerk contract for agenda meeting management software that is going to be rolled out in the coming weeks. Additionally, as of last week, the Personnel Committee approved new workstations and flooring replacement for room 230, with the work scheduled to take place during the Board of Aldermen summer break. The most significant reduction on page 2 is line item 566000, which is professional services. This line was initially allocated for alders to print and mail materials to their wards. However, following 2 fiscal year budget cycles, the account has experienced minimal utilization, and the budget director reduced this line item by $79,000 to help ensure the board remains within budgetary constraints for the upcoming fiscal year. So this is as I'm sure you're hearing from every department, everyone's had to cut back a little bit, and this is the line item that we have had to cut back on for this year. And this matter was discussed with Personnel Administration Committee on April 24th and on May 1st, and discussions are ongoing. Before concluding my remarks, I'd like to share that the Board of Aldermen is partnering with the Missouri Secretary of State Local Records Program to begin to digitize and publicly share our legislative body's historical records, many of which have remained in storage for over a century. And in conclusion, I want to emphasize that the fiscal year 26 budget for the Board of Aldermen indicates a commitment to fiscal responsibility while continuing to focus on essential services by prioritizing investment in constituent engagement. The proposed reductions in various categories demonstrate an effort to streamline operations and manage taxpayer resources in an effective manner in a year where all of us are being asked to cut back some. My Chief of Staff, Jay Nelson, is here with me as well, and we are both happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Madam President. Starting in order of seniority, I will start with Alderwoman Sanye.
Thank you, Chairman, Madam President. Thank you for being here today. I actually don't have many questions about your budget. You all's budget is one of the few that you actually took the proactive to make your own cuts and size down where appropriate. I would just use this as an opportunity to thank you and the Personnel Committee. You know, I think the place where I really support the Board of Aldermen putting raises is in our staff and in our support, the clerks, you know, the folks who really help us do the engine, and I really have enjoyed the focus that we've done on the past few years. When I came and joined and saw what they were being paid, how long it had been since they had received a raise, and just the horrible comparison, I was kind of shocked that they had hung around for as long as they have. So I'm just very glad to see that we are focusing on supporting the folks who support us, who stay with us at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock when we have the hearings, who come before we get here, who herd us all together and who really keep us moving. So just a thank you to your office and to the Personnel Committee, again, to your office specifically for being proactive with your budget and making your own cuts and kind of leading with fiscal responsibility, because that obviously it's difficult for every department to do that, but I mean, you were one of the few that did that. And then, you know, I'm just happy to continue to support us, supporting our staff and making sure that they have what they need to support us and stay afloat in their lives with their families. Thank you.
Not a problem.
Alderwoman Velasquez.
I don't have any questions, President.
Browning.
I also don't have any questions. Thank you for your presentation today.
With that, also don't have any questions. I would just echo kind of the sentiments of what Alderwoman Sanye said. You know, I know each department always need a little bit more funding, but I know this department has kind of did a decrease in some of the items, and it's been an honor to be on personnel. I know one of the first things that we did is make sure that we give staff raises who haven't got raises in a very long time outside of the 3% that the mayor's office has done. So I also don't have any questions.
Well, thank you. I also would be remiss if I didn't also thank Ryan Coleman, who does a tireless amount of work both on our budget and helping us suss through everything in the budget. So I just want to make sure we give him some props as well, as he's been really supportive and helping us figure out how we pare down a little bit. So thank you.
He has been a rock star and has been super helpful also with myself on this budget committee, giving us a framework. So thank you so much, Mr. Coleman. And with that, if there's no more questions from members of the committee, I will take a motion that we go into recess until 1 p.m. today when we hear back from the police department.
Second.
It was moved by the Alderwoman from the 6th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we go into recess until Welcome back from the recess from Budget and Public Employees Committee. We are getting back into the action of things. And for our last item number for the day will be the St. Louis Police Department. So whenever the department is ready, please come up and present your budget. Just state your name so we can have it for our record and meeting minutes. And whoever may come after our chief, please just state your name and position so we can have it for the minutes. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Chief, please proceed.
Chairman, thank you very much.
Just hit that button. The mic may be off.
Chairman, thank you very much. And Board of Alders, appreciate being here today to present our budget. One of the things that, my name is Chief Robert J. Tracy, the Chief of St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. With me here today, who will also be speaking, is Dave Daniels, who runs our budget and finance from the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. We have Mitch McCoy, Director of Public Affairs, and then Major Joe Marisi. So anytime, any questions that have to go in greater detail, I might ask each to come up and speak on my behalf. But the one thing about Dave Daniels, having him here, Dave has been around for many, many years. He actually has been in place when we were under state control and through local control, and now with House Bill 495, we've been taking the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department last month when a bill was signed by the governor. We came back under state control. So working through this budget, we'll still continue to work through the budget. I'm having Dave go through it because he's has gone through this process and can work both sides as we work with the city, and we also work some of the things that we can get an explanation how we did it under the state. Our overall budget proposal is about $200 million, up from 180, almost 183 million from last year. But there's some things that Dave will get into as far as some of the things that the nuances that are happening right now, where there's money that's being billed back to St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department because of services rendered, where we still have human resources, we still have we have legal representation, and there's other things that are in there, fleet services, and all those things are being wrapped in. Dave can explain that in greater detail. So with that, I'd like to have Dave present it, and I'll be here for any questions, operational piece or any other questions you might have. Is that acceptable, Chair?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Again, Mr. Dave, if you can just state your first and last name and position for the record.
David Daniels, Fiscal Manager, St. Louis Police Department.
All right, and whenever you get yourself ready, you may proceed.
So what we're presenting is really a baseline budget, because the budget itself has only increased in real terms by about a little over $1 million. It seems like there's a large increase, but that is due to internal service fund charges that are new this year in our budget that were not there previously. So as you know, the House Bill 495 requires revenue matches. And now those revenue matches are a little confusing. because those revenue matches fall on calendar years rather than fiscal years. So the first period we had that we had to look at, both Paul Payne and myself, was that the city owes us 22% of general revenue for the period ending December 31st, 2025, and then 23% for the period running from January 1st, 2026 to December 31st, 2026. That kind of creates a dilemma because the city runs on a fiscal year. In speaking with the budget division, the budget they've allocated to us is around between those two numbers, between 22 and 23%. And that's just because the language is really not very precise. Now, I assume that Paul Payne spoke with most of you about the internal service charges that were coming from other departments. So is there any need for me to go through those?
If you want to maybe go through maybe highlights of top
Okay, sure.
budget, I think there will be some questions on the internal services, but to just get an overview before we dive into that probably be helpful.
Sure. Okay. So, so we have $429,000 that is being charged to us from the Department of Personnel. The City Councilor's Office is $5.6 million, and when I looked at the personnel, it is kind of extraordinary because there are 13 people are assigned to the City Councilor's Police Unit. Back when we were under state control, there was only 5 people. And so really the legal services that the police department requires have increased dramatically in the last 13 years, right? So facilities management is charging us $5.4 million. And going back to the City Councilor's Office, part of the City Councilor's Office budget includes $4 million for claims, for damage claims. So when the police department gets sued, there is money that is already budgeted for those lawsuits, okay? And then finally, the Equipment Services Division, which provides our fleet services, that's $4.9 million. So that combined with about $1 million, a little over $1 million in added revenue, accounts for totally for the increase in our budget. When it comes to line items in our budget, there really aren't significant changes from the prior year. That's because, as with every part of city government, we're dealing with really kind of a flat revenues for the city, a small increase, but flat revenues, and the budget reflects that. I've been getting questions from department members who are wondering, hey, are we going to get, are there going to be, is there money for some raises? And really, there's not large amounts for raises. There's been a little bit of hysteria about state control and what that 22% or 22.5% really means. It doesn't mean a huge increase to the police department's budget because of the internal service fund charges that are being allocated to the police department. So that's why you're not going to see any dramatic increases in line items, because there is no like big bundle of extra money that the police department has as a result of state control. And I'm only saying that because I have an internal audience at the police department who thinks there's a lot more money available, but there's not. There were some a question came up that the chief can answer if you wish, but somebody had a question about how much we're investing in the academy. There's been some well-publicized problems with the building itself. So we're putting about $400,000 of improvements to the facility, but the facility needs more. But again, we have to balance all our other needs. We have to buy some vehicles. We have to maintain our IT infrastructure. Still have to buy office supplies and equipment for officers. And so when anyone points out one particular problem the police department has and says, well, why don't you invest in that? Why don't you invest more money in that? The question is always going to be, well, what do you want to cut? Because there's not extra money to buy a lot of new things. Most of the requests that came to my office, if they were marked as like a new contract, a new item, I just cut them out of the request because there isn't new money to pay for new things. Replacement, yes, but not new things. So there's not much in terms of new initiatives in this budget, with the biggest one being the academy. I would update you that except for one transfer, all the money is available for the new firing range. But that project is already proceeding, but all the funding is soon to be in place. We had to take money out of our asset forfeiture fund to pay for part of the range. And with our asset forfeiture account, we'll also need money out of asset forfeiture to pay for an upgrade to our PeopleSoft system, as well as for Sound Thinking, which is the new name for ShotSpotter. Yeah. So if you have any particular questions, and before we go any further, so if you look at the overtime for police, that is not what we'll probably spend on overtime. If there are vacancies, what happens when we have vacancies is we try to backfill those vacancies with overtime. So we will likely spend more than $13 million and have to transfer money out of salaries to pay for the overtime. Yes, sir.
Devotie, before we jump into questions?
Want a clarification so I understand
Right.
what's being discussed, that's all.
Gotcha.
Can I do that? I have
Absolutely, just for, usually you just kind of ask the chair, but you can absolutely jump in, just want to, I know you're the new.
I apologize, Mr. Chair. May I ask a question for clarity in the midst of this discussion?
Yes, you can.
You're talking about overtime. My simple question is, are you on page 336 when we're talking about total for all positions? Just so I know what we're,
You totally fine, Alderman.
Now,
I said you're fine, you're fine.
mm,
And and I'm looking at, so I'm clear on overtime, I'm looking at 306.
7,
That is talking about the overtime
police.
of police. There
That's
is a
commission.
overtime for regular employees, and then there's overtime for police.
Correct. So for
Falcon.
civilians and commission.
And then the operating line item detail budget, 307 is what I think he is referring to. It's kind of one of the bigger books.
that's why I asked the question.
Gotcha. Did you have an additional question, Alderman?
No, sir.
Okay. You can proceed.
So aside from that, I don't have any particular complaints because I know there are revenue constraints. So, do we have enough for vehicles? No, we don't. But this is really, when we're looking at the budget, it's a zero-sum game. So we can't give every division in the police department what it wants. And so we don't. We have to meet the constraints. So we have to meet the constraints given us by Paul Payne. And so there's not big increases in this budget anywhere.
Was that all of your presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Could you quickly, because under police, so just for, so we're all aware, under the police department, we also have, I don't know if you want to highlight city marshals and park rangers, if there's anything that, before folks ask questions, may want to include.
Not really. It's the same number of personnel as before, and those particular units don't have particularly large budgets beyond personnel. The big expense besides personnel for the marshals is they have a contract for professional services, and those are the guards that operate at various city facilities after hours.
Gotcha. And I'm going to turn it over to committee members, but just to kind of piggyback on Alderman Devotie with the overtime question, and I think a comment you said is that you're probably going to go over that amount for overtime, correct?
And and I only say that, Alderman, because I've worked here 24 years and we've gone over the allocation for overtime every year.
Gotcha. I think last year it looks like you requested about $12,407,000 and change, and you went over, actually spent about $15,350,698.
And that was that was just in the general fund. So, because sometimes we have money allocated in the Prop P money, right? Overtime allocated in Prop P. Probably should have sent this to you, but if there are copies, do you have somebody who can run up here?
I have somebody come grab those and pass them out, and we'll make sure the clerk also gets these copies so that they are in the record for the drive. And just for, I guess, the edit for people in the public, what are you sharing with the committee?
Okay. So I prepared a spreadsheet that shows all of our sources of revenue that come from the city, right? So I don't include grants or contracts because they can kind of distort the amount of funding because those can change fairly dramatically from one year to another. But these are all the funding sources for the police department, from the police department proper to marshals, park rangers, and all of the sales taxes and graduated business license taxes, all those included, so that when you look at it, the second to last column is FY26 total, so this upcoming budget year, and the last column is the total for last year.
Okay. I will hold off on my questions. I will start in order of seniority and committee members, starting with Alderwoman Sanye.
Good afternoon. Nice to see you all. I'm always going to acknowledge the work. That's the first thing I do. So I just want to acknowledge the work that you all have been doing. I think crime is the most talked about topic in our city. But what I can say as an alderwoman is every time I've reached out to you all, first of all, I love my police liaisons, and I also love both of the police captains that I have. They're extremely responsible. They stay aware. They prioritize neighborhood meetings. Anytime something happens and I follow up and ask about an incident, I get a response quickly. It's to the point where I usually don't even have to go to the chief or anyone higher up because they're, just highly involved. So I just want to give credit to them because I know that their jobs are stressful. I know sometimes we don't even have all the answers, but I have found them to be incredibly responsive and I feel like an attempt to really be community-centered as well. So thank you for that. For questions today, I think you kind of hinted at like my first question already, which was really just about any impacts that the not having local control financially would have on the budget. But I think you've kind of hit at that quite a bit already. So I can see that. And I saw too that there was a visit recently with the administration up to the Capitol to kind of talk about a number of things. I guess the first question that I would give to you all is, has there been any conversations that you all are privy to at the state level to talk about with their recent mandate, how they might contribute to you all's budget or anything along those lines? And if the answer is no, that's fine.
The answer is no.
Yep. I think it's good just to put these things on record. Can you speak to, again, this is tied to our larger political climate, but have any federal cuts impacted you all's department and your budget? And if so, could you speak to that?
I don't think given the priorities of the federal government right now, that it's particularly likely that police grants, related grants will be cut, but there's no guarantee. And, we have a lot of grants that, potentially we could lose, right? We don't know. A big one, we have a contract with the St. Louis Housing Authority for officers, and we really have no idea what might happen with that. Alderwoman, there's absolutely no way of knowing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's very understandable. I just think it's good to put it on record because I think sometimes residents think that we kind of do have all the answers or we know everything. So I think it's important for them to know, like, in some ways, we're all kind of figuring out what this is going to look like together. Given some of the just issues I know that we've talked about before when you all here, we talked a lot about some of the recruitment challenges that you all were having and some staffing difficulties. Can you talk about how that's been for you since we were here in the last budget season, and some of the approaches you've been taking and the results?
So after the last collective bargaining agreement, 2 years ago, the officers were given a $12,000 raise. This was in 2023. Earlier this year, somewhere around 7% for our officers. And then before we went over to state control, we were in contract talks with our union, the Police Officers Association. So since being taken over, I know that's going to go before the Board of Police Commissioners and within a budget that is going to come out and how they figure out the budget. And then they talk percentages, 23%, 24%, 25%. And I think that all has to be ironed out. And as Dave has talked about, the cycle of when you're supposed to go with that money is not in sync with the fiscal year. It's a calendar year. So that some of the language there, I think, has to be kind of cleaned up in the legislation. But when it came to recruiting, one of the things that we've seen, because of these making us somewhat competitive, we're not the highest paid, but we became a little more competitive after those 2 raises, started seeing officers come back. And in the last 2 years, a little over 2 years, I've sworn back 35 police officers that have left our jurisdiction, went to other jurisdictions, and I swore them back in, including two weeks ago, and I have 3 more that are in the process of doing background in other jurisdictions. We trained them, and they left. And there was a lot of reasons why they left, and the reasons, one of them was economics, one was some of the things of somewhat morale, making arrests and not seeing those arrests go through on the prior administrations with the Circuit Attorney's Office. So they're starting to come back, but we also did a recruitment campaign. And with the help of with the St. Louis Police Foundation, we did billboards, we did a lot of things. We revamped on how we're doing that. We created a recruitment team. They're calling up on a website, and at the same time, under the Department of Personnel, when Sonia Gray was in charge of this, the director, we had worked out where, through the Civil Service Commission, the charter, that they're still in charge, but having 50 departments, how does the Department of Personnel director prioritize the police department? I know in other police departments that I worked in, we owned our own recruiting. We did our recruiting. We actually have an HR. So what we did is we asked, can we get those names immediately, quicker, to change our business model? Because if you wait 6 weeks to call a person back, they've moved on to another police department because they've been applying. So after the recruitment campaign, making a business decision still with the oversight within the rules, we got very creative in how we had to change some of the things, staying within the rules of civil service. And we started getting more people in immediately the day they apply. They're in the system. We start to do the testing, and then we just finished with 35 people that just finished their psychological evaluation, and 25 are going to go into the next academy class shortly. In spite of not being under civil service, in spite of moving to new rules, as the police chief that's crossing over from being here 2.5 years and now working under state control, I'm making sure that we're not slowing down, we're not going to be paralyzed by this change, and we're not waiting for a board of commissioners to come in to give the okay, because they will want to support the chief in their role. So we're going to start that academy class, and I have been in contact with the governor's office, some of the governor's people. I'm also have met with our administration, with Mayor Kara Spence's office. So I'm making sure that I'm communicating to everyone what we're doing, why we're doing it, and we're not going to be paralyzed by this change. We have to keep it moving. I don't want to lose these candidates. So I'm hoping to have 25, possibly 27 in the academy in the next couple of weeks. We just graduated 14 last week. We have another 10 that'll be graduate in July. And you got to remember, we can put 25 in, it'll whittle down to almost 50% because it takes a certain type of person to become a police officer. We want to make sure their mindset's in the right place and then make sure this is exactly what they want to do. So to give you numbers, after we did the collective bargaining agreement, last one, working with the Police Officers Association, we were at 1,100 is our budgeted strength. It came down from 1,225, that we agreed to do that. And with the Police Officers Association's agreement with the union, we're at 879 commissioned police officers, 10 of which are the 10 in the academy right now. So I include them in the overall number, but then I also, transparency, you can extrapolate that number out. When we take a look at our civilian personnel, we have authorized of 467 people. We have 368 filled, so that's 99 openings. And I heard you, Chairman, you talked about the marshals and also the park rangers. So we have 25 budgeted positions for marshals, 16 which have filled. And for park rangers, we have 31 budgeted positions, 23 which are filled. And hopefully get this academy class in coming. And then we continue to hire civilians. I'm still working with Department of Personnel. I'm human resource. I just signed off this week on about 6 to 7 hires. So we're not cutting each other off because the success of the police department is the success of the city, and likewise into the administration. We're good partners, but we're coming underneath a different type of oversight. But as your chief, I'm going to make sure we keep things moving, and I've expressed that to the state administration, and I've expressed that to our mayoral administration and this administration. So, and they've both said, just lead on, chief, basically, just keep doing what you're doing until we have that type of oversight. And, I've been a police chief in a couple other places. So running a police department, making sure we move, I'm going to continue to do that to be a good leader for this city.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that you feel like those efforts are moving in the right direction. You kind of answered
We have more work to do. We certainly are losing to attrition,
That's what
but
I
we've
said.
slowed it down all the way.
Yeah. And you kind of answered some of my questions because they were specific about the breakdown of, civilian versus uniformed officers, but you just answered some of that. I had a question about just some specifics about park rangers. Is there, in regards to park rangers, I would say that that's something that I've been interacting with quite a bit. I've been having instances in some of the parks in the 7th Ward where, folks drinking in a park or using substances, staying out really late to the point where people have moved out of their homes. Very serious. I know you all are aware. We've been in regular communication, but along those lines, we've leaned on park rangers sometimes to fill in the gaps when officers are, dealing with violent crimes or higher priority things. Is there anything specific that you think we can do budgetarily to support park rangers to help you there?
I think within the general fund and authorized strength, I'd like to get back up to that authorized strength and then say, can we have more? But we got to get up to that. And a lot of times, marshal positions and sometimes park ranger positions, they're applying to be police officers as well. So they kind of graduate out of that when we start to see the successes. And then if someone doesn't want to be a police officer because of the type of work we're going to do, we actually try to fill these individuals and offer them a civilian job, a professional job, a marshal position, a park ranger, because they're trying to want to go down that. So we don't want to just cut them. Okay, let's give you some options. Don't leave the city service because we know how many openings are in almost every department in the city. So we're being very strategic about that. But right now, I think everybody's always going to talk about pay. We got to stay competitive, and that goes for marshals, park rangers, and also goes for our civilian personnel. And I think that's the thing we should be looking at, and I think you all know in the city to be competitive for all the positions outside the police department and all the different departments. We got to stay competitive.
Excellent. Some of these questions, my next questions are around just the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, like our relationship with immigrant and customs enforcement. I saw an article recently where the spokesperson for the police officer, the police department said that we do not enforce federal immigration laws, but it is the policy of our department to contact immigrant and customs enforcement anytime an individual without legal citizenship is arrested for a crime. I don't really want to get into the specifics of any individual. That was just my first time being made aware of that. So I was just curious, how long has that been the case? Is that a newer directive? Just any context around that?
No, that's been in place, and then it's actually being re-emphasized as, I think, through a legislative order from the, I'm sorry, from a governor's order as far as putting that in place, and then making sure that they're slowing it down, but some of the things that we have to comply with, some of the laws, and so that's what we're doing. But and I've said this before when we're doing surveillance technology, and I believe we had someone from the Mexican consulate's office that was in on Zoom. And I just want to tell everyone, we need to protect people, whether they're here, they're undocumented, or they are citizens. My philosophy is, if you break the law, you're going to get our attention. How you got into this country, that's for the federal authorities in certain areas to investigate. And we're not going door to door to do that. If there's a violent felon out there that they might need assistance, we have task forces. We might have to assist with that because they've committed a violent crime in our country or committed a crime. But even we want people to report crimes to us. We want people, because a lot of times I've seen, and I've worked in melting pots in New York, Chicago, and even Wilmington, Delaware, that sometimes people will be victimized in their own community because they're afraid to make reports. And we can't have that either. We don't want people getting hurt in the city.
And how are officers trained to determine the legal status of a citizen? And what are the protocols if an officer is unsure about someone's legal status?
Well, first they're going to break the law. That's how they bring our attention. So if someone commits a crime in our city, whether you're documented, undocumented, or a citizen, we're going to put you under arrest for probable cause. And then we do the paperwork. We have to do background, fingerprints, and we got to make sure we know who you are and who we're arresting without getting false names. So when we hit that point, if we can't identify it, we have to do an investigation before that person can be released, brought to court. So the investigation follows the crime. We don't do the investigation to create a crime, to create this issue. That's not our job to do. That's someone else's job, and we're making sure that if you break the law, that's what gets our attention. So it's not, we actually put that first, and that's what the officers are trained to do. They're not going door to door. Our officers are pretty much community engaged, and the more we get better and better at this, they get to know the community, and the community can help us keep safe no matter how you're here. And we want to make sure that we're keeping everyone safe. It's
And
really about the crime.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. So anytime someone is arrested, I'm trying to understand, is it for any type of ordinance violation or any type of law that's broken? If there's a suspect, if they do any type of thing and they get arrested, that ICE is then contacted?
If we do make an arrest, actually there's an obligation now that they are looking at things that we have to put into the Regis system as far as a mandate that's come from the state government, that we have to make sure that we're putting in and document whether it rises to a level of being that someone else gets involved. We still have to document.
And can you just tell us about that process? Like, is there someone appointed on the staff who makes contact once an arrest happens? Is it the arresting officer themselves who contacts ICE? What's that process like?
Well, when you make arrests, you try to verify the person's identity. So you would be reaching out in our databases, and you will be reaching out to a federal authority if we do have someone that's undocumented, to find out who they are. And if that's something that they want to take action on, that would be something that they make the choice on.
Okay. I'm switching gears a little bit here, but I did just want to clarify. So it is not just for violent crimes; it's for any crime. And
you're arrested, we have to identify who you are. Yes.
Okay. And also wanted to clarify that there has been no conversation that Missouri State has had about how they might be making any financial contributions or supports to the police department.
No, not at this time. Most of the things Dave hit on some of the grants, and to answer that question, we haven't seen anything in our grants right now that to say that there might be cuts in some of the grants that we have, but we haven't seen anything yet. And then from the state right now, I think it's very premature, but I think within the legislation, it hasn't been all about all the funding coming from the city when they talk 23%, 24%, or it even in 2028, 25%. As I read the legislation, and then as we go further and that board gets in place, we'll have further conversations. But like I said, we're in an area where I'm learning a lot of things as well, and I'm asking questions. You are, to make sure that I'm a good steward of this police department and being a good communicator between the state and also a city government.
Okay. And I think you've talked about, I am switching gears now, a little bit about like kind of overtime and staffing flexibility. I just was curious, and I've been really asking this of all the departments, and you spoke to this a little bit, but are there any specific strategies that you're putting in place to reduce your reliance on overtime?
Oh, we always take a look at to make sure that it's not becoming institutionalized. That's something you just get. There has to be a purpose. There has to be justifications of why we're doing some overtime, and what we're addressing, and what are we accomplishing by doing overtime. So we have ComStat meetings. We just finished one this morning. I have executive management meetings on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We talk about how we're using our resources, resources. Overtime is not a bad thing, because if you're down offices, you're actually, that money that's being used, you're actually pushing it over. As long as you're not as long as the officers are not getting exhausted, you don't want tired police officers. You have to balance that. And we measure the amount of overtime that each officer is doing. We get reports on weekly. So we do strategize. It is a very good tool. I've used it in every police department I've been in when it's used correctly. And we got to be mindful of that. So it all folds into a type of strategy. And there is also grant over out there as well. We do use it, but how are you using it? And through a ComStat methodology, we're making sure that when we're using the overtime, it's being effective and how we're using it. And then obviously there's going to be costs that you always go over. If we have civil unrest, if we have these functions downtown, parades, or we have marathons, we have fireworks, we have so many things throughout the city. And of course, when an officer makes an arrest, if they have to go to court on their day off, and/or some of these things, these runs can't be prevented, because you have to make sure that you're following through on cases.
And along those lines, your budget for recruitment seems pretty modest to me. So I just wanted to verify with you that you felt like this budget gives you everything you need to go about recruitment of officers adequately.
Well, as we're putting the budget together, we have a good budget director for the city who has to look at every department. So where we have to balance this to get to the place that we're presenting, as Dave talked about, we're able to shift some money where, this is us just trying to forecast how much money we're going to need. If there's some other money that we can pull from as the year goes on, we will switch accordingly if that starts to run out. So, this is kind of the things that we spent. We were able to get. We were very fortunate to have a very generous St. Louis Police Foundation that helped assist us. It's not going to show up in these numbers where we can get the job done and help enhance. It doesn't supplant the budget. It supplements a budget.
Understood. Yeah, I think that's really important, because I think all of us want to make sure that when you are recruiting, you have the funds not just to recruit, but to recruit, quality candidates. So I know that's pretty important.
But think about it. Recruitment shouldn't be just with the recruitment. Every police officer, right up to the chief, and every civilian, and even I asked the Board of Aldermen and every elected official, we all should be talking about this profession and other professions within it. But selfishly, I'm going to talk about policing or a civilian job at the lab. And, we're going to every community meeting. We're going into the schools. We just played CVPA and basketball. We were out there. We played against the county up in their court at Jennings High School. And we're meeting with the kids, and they're seeing police officers and work and being out there. And every place that we go, we have a table to do recruitment, and then we're looking at other ideas of where we can go out to try to go. We're working with the HBCU. We're working with Harris Stowe. We've put together a youth police academy. So we're going to try to do 2 this year, where it was very well received, and we're working with HBCU for the summer. And we had a graduation, and we want to do 2 of them. And then there's tuition reimbursement for some of the kids that are going to HBCU. Other things that we're doing for recruitment with UMSL, we're one of the few where we are the only police department in the state of Missouri working with UMSL, that I signed an MOU with the dean of their schools, as far as every officer can go to tuition free, and then their books will be picked up by the St. Louis Police Foundation to go get your bachelor's degree, get your bachelor's I'm not too sure it's the masters yet, but the bachelors will start part-time. So we're trying to incentivize everything we're doing, and that leads to these kids. When I say kids, coming up and getting the next generation into action.
Thank you. And for your technology and equipment, does the proposed budget include ongoing support for body cameras, crime data analysis tools, reporting systems, automated reporting systems, because I know some of you all have those. So is all of that covered in this proposed budget?
So what we like to do is just, with this, always going to be upgrades. I'll let Dave answer that, but technology is something that just can't stay stagnant. It has to be something that we continue to look at, upgrade, and we got to make sure that we stay on top of it, so the systems that we're working. So what we've put in there, we're looking, hopefully that can get us through into the next follow fiscal year.
Okay, and again, just want to put this on the record, but wanted to be clear when it comes to your fleet and facilities. Has the state of Missouri had any conversation about financially contributing to those expenses, like those associated with police vehicles and things of that, and fleet maintenance and things of that nature?
Well, I think that Dave hit on some of it. When you look at the $16 million that are online, sorry, forgive me, I don't have my glasses. The internal services on 565-800, that part of that, when we talked about legal, HR, billing us back, that is part of the fleet services that the city's charging us for the individuals that support our cars, fixing the cars and everything else. And I think there has to be a bigger conversation when we start to get the board in place, when we start to look at with the transition director, what came over. And listen, this is new to me. I wasn't here in 2012 to 2013. What came over from state and it came over to the city, and now that everybody's looking at what goes back under House Bill 495.
But the Internal Revenue Services is still from our budget. So I just want to clarify that it's not the state of, of Missouri has not talked about how they can help with police vehicles, fleet maintenance, or anything like that.
I believe everything it's going to be coming out of the city budget, and if that does change, I will definitely let everyone know.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman.
Vice Chair Browning?
Thank you. Thank you, Chief, for being here.
Thank you, Alderman.
Just going to go through a few items here and understand I'm asking these questions because, again, just as I said with the fire department, I want to make sure that you all have what you need. And if there's any money that you need from other things, I want to make sure that, if we can move it from somewhere else, that we can do that. So I'll just start with, in the line item detail, page 307 in this big book of ours that we have. We see, and keep in mind, I have to compare things to the 24 numbers because we don't have 25 numbers yet complete, although we can those in progress. But the difference between what you're requesting for office supplies, for instance, there's a difference of $278,000 from what was spent in 24 and what you're requesting this year. And I guess my question for you is just why request more again this year when it wasn't used 2 years ago? And if we look at what's been spent this year, I think we can see that only 48% of the budget has been spent this year on office supplies.
And Alderman, that's why I'm going to play a little bit of a, if you don't mind, tag team, because Dave is my expert on some of these things where the costs went up and down. And then I'm willing to answer every question, but I want to make sure I get Dave involved in this. He's getting down into the weeds that he could probably give you a better answer than I can right now.
Of course.
I'd have to get back to you through the chair.
I'm always interested in getting the right answers, so I don't mind who it's from.
Thank
you. Alderman, I normally go with the requested budget from my supply division because, as you know, normally absorb some of the costs, additional costs that are coming from our IT division. They're buying equipment for a lot of other divisions. And this may be a year where they're buying more supplies. We can certainly, and I will mark this, we can certainly give you all the detail of what is being requested from the supply division.
Yeah, and I'm not particularly interested in, how many pens you're buying or anything like that. I'm just more interested, where do we have excess room in the budget, and is there, an availability there to move it around? Because I want to make sure, again, that we, if you identify certain issues in your department that are being unmet right now, or if there's anything, because I hear from my constituents all the time about, I feel like we don't have enough police on the streets. I feel like, we're not seeing enough traffic enforcement. And I know that all these things are related back to how many vehicles we can service, how many people we can put in uniform, and how many people we can recruit. And that all depends on, everything's interconnected, right? So that's why I asked.
Yeah, it is, everything is interconnected. And if you're wanting to know where I will be putting any extra money, when we had to cut our budget to meet the allocation, I had to cut the line item for promotional testing, which when you look down further into professional services, that's a $300,000 line item. So as we move through the year, and we find that we're not spending as much as we expect in any particular area, we try to fund the things that we had to cut to meet the allocation. So it's the same thing with, I have a budget for salaries, but if I don't spend those salaries, I can almost guarantee you they're going to go into overtime.
So similarly, if you're underspending in one place, you feel like you're going to overspend in another, and that's going to be moved around.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to roll past, 'cause I noticed similar thing, difference between spending on like wearing apparel, 235,000, difference on budgeting for ammunition, 283,000. So there's differences every year, and it helps to be able to look at multiple years in a row and see kind of what goes unused. But I'm just kind of curious why we see, like, in other departments, sometimes we see like a couple thousand, or sometimes we see maybe max like 20,000 over budget. These are in the hundreds of thousands. So I know that money can go towards a lot of different things, but you're saying you can move it around within the budget if that's the case where you need to use it on, say, overtime.
Right, and under state control, nothing's changed as far as budget transfers. So we still have to send our budget transfers to Paul Payne. Well, they go to the mayor's office first, and then to Paul Payne's, public safety, and then the mayor's office, then Paul Payne's office, and then to E&A. So nothing has changed as far as our budget transfer process, and nothing will change.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. And similarly, I see a big budget jump in computer service and computer software licenses this year. I think I heard someone mention that you're in the midst of upgrading software. Is that what I heard, or can you expand on that a little bit?
There are a number of, and I can't recall them, but there are a number of new systems, new software that licenses that we purchased or are purchasing. And so those costs are going to go up. And really, when you look at our organization, we spend the lion's share, over 90%, on salary and benefits. And so the money that we spend on technology is a really great buy, because it means that the human beings that we have hired can work more efficiently. And because it's our workforce that's the real expense. And so anytime we can find a technological solution that makes police officers more efficient, then it's a good thing to invest in it.
Gotcha. One thing we were mentioning about is recruiting, and I heard Alderwoman Sanye asking about this. When I look at the amount for recruiting budgeted for this year, it was $100,000. $0 have been spent so far this year. Can you explain how you're recruiting but not spending money out of that fund?
They've been going to local universities, going to free events. There had been a plan, and I don't know exactly why it fell through, but there had been a plan to do recruiting at military sites where, or military installations where soldiers, sailors were getting out of the service and trying to interest them in a career, because they leave the service if they don't have something lined up, if they're law enforcement oriented, whether it's a police officer or maybe somebody who could work in our lab. We want to try to catch them before somebody else does. I don't know the reason why those trips didn't happen, but I know that was part of the plan.
Okay, so, again, we can look at this again next year and kind of look at, what it takes to, because we want you to be able to recruit people, right? We want you to have the officers you need to do the job. But, when I'm trying to track this in the budget, I'm not seeing it. And that's why I just want to make sure that I understand where the money's coming from so that we can make sure everything is good.
And so to finish that thought, I'm pretty sure that we used the recruiting money that we didn't spend on the range, because every year someone from the chief's office walks down the hall and they run into me and they say, hey, the chief wants you to find money for this project that was unanticipated, 18 months ago. And that's how we fund these projects. So
it's always a little bit of creative accounting to try to find money for these.
Well, yeah, that range is going to cost like $2.7 million. Yeah. And so there were so many accounts we pulled from to fund that. But again, it may seem like, oh, gee, you have that money, you don't need it. By the end of the year, I'll need it.
So speaking of funds to pull from, you mentioned when the city is sued, that there's money budgeted for those lawsuits. I'm assuming you mean the legal costs of running those lawsuits, paying for the lawyers and all that stuff?
To pay for the claims. So going back to when the department was under state control, what would happen is if there were claims related to, let's say, an officer getting into a car accident, something in the normal course of duty, then the PFPC, the Public Facility Protection Corporation, which is the city's in-house insurance agency, right? They would pay those type of claims. Or if an officer, if there was a shooting and we were sued successfully, they would pay those sorts of claims. But if there was an issue where let's say there was a sexual harassment claim occurring within the police department, or the city councilor's office determined that the problem occurred because of a management error of some sort, then they would say, well, police department, you're taking it out of your budget. I think what the city is now doing is trying to set aside money ahead of time, actually budget for it so that there is a pot of money that, nobody needs to scramble, to find money for. And so it's trying to be more responsible.
Gotcha. So, like, just to use an example, last year there was a $23 million that was awarded to Luther Hall, former St. Louis police officer, from his mistreatment in a 2017 protest against police violence. Where did that money come out of to pay that settlement? Was that within the police budget or?
No. It would have come from PFPC because we don't have that kind of extra money.
Sorry, you said it came from where?
It would have had to come from PFPC. I don't think the city has any other. There is no, that I know of. There is no other fund that the city has that pays claims. And I don't think the city has any sort of insurance, like outside insurance for something like that.
So now that we're facing state control, if that were to happen again, hopefully not, but if it were to happen again and there's a settlement being paid out, is the state taking on that cost now, or where does that money come from?
I don't have the answer to that question.
Okay, I just, it's about, when we have these budgets and we want to make sure that, that obviously the police department couldn't take a $24 million hit and continue to do the same level of service. And that's true of any city department. So there's a concern that when we're required to spend a certain amount and when we are then seeing amounts over that, where that comes from, how that impacts the rest of the city. And that's why I'm trying to figure it out, because we've been saying through so many budget hearings, just hearing a lot of departments ask for, can you find us 20,000? Can you find us, 100,000 for a new position? And again, it's all connected. The last question that I had for you all was just, as we go forward, the internal service fund is something that we've created in order to figure out the costs coming from other departments and then put that under the police item budget. I think this is new, so we're still kind of getting used to seeing that, but that'll be interesting to see as well, because I think when we're looking at the connectedness here of the police being another department at the city, that we realize they're supported by so many other city departments. When I took a tour of the supply division last year, it was noted that the police vehicles are being repaired in their garages and coming out of their funds. So now we're tracking that with the internal service fund. And so it'll be really interesting to see that total number of just that interconnectedness. Thank you so much for being here today and answering the questions. Please do let us know if there's anything else we can do. I think we're much more limited in control here now, but I want to make sure that we continue to have a good relationship so that we can make sure that we're doing what needs to be done. I think that's the last question I have for you. Chief Tracy, I do have a question for you. A concern I hear a lot from constituents is about traffic violence. And we are seeing incredibly reckless driving on our streets. Now, I've heard under the new administration that the mayor wants to take a tougher stance on this, and we've already seen some ATVs and dirt bikes being seized. I hear them almost every night going up and down. I live a couple blocks away from Kings Highway, and so I can hear those motors as they. And when we see the behavior that is associated with that, running at red lights in large groups, popping wheelies in the middle of the road, doing what we call takeovers in the middle of intersections and all that. And then people we also see people in just regular vehicles speeding all the time and hitting things and causing damage to our city. And so my question is, with the new administration, what are the approaches that the city, that the police are taking to combat traffic violence and reckless driving? And is this does this involve putting more officers on the street, the more use of technology? What kind of steps are being taken so that I can just relay that to my constituents?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's nothing, we've already been putting things in place prior to this administration. One of the things after the young woman, the Edmondson woman, lost her legs during a volleyball tournament back in February of 2023, we took a good look to see exactly, first, there was other issues that were going on why that person should not have been out in the street, and led to some other things about some failures in our criminal justice system. But taking a look at that, we usually do something here called a cruising detail to make sure that we're staying on top of these people that are driving recklessly. They're coming in with hundreds of cars. They're doing their own shows. They're doing slideshows. They're shutting down streets. Washington Ave was used as one of those venues, and we've been able to now change some of the traffic patterns to really calm that area down, and we shut down from 2nd, then we went to Tucker, and then we went to 14th Street, especially going in from Wednesday even into late Sunday night, and we used officers out there to make sure we calm that down. And then we take a look at any places that they're going. We've been on social media for the last couple of years, the people, the organizers. We will knock on their door. It's open source. We can investigate who's doing these things. And anybody that's organized, they're responsible. So there's a lot of things that have somewhat changed, and we were coming out of the pandemic. We were coming out of a lot of uncertainty, civil unrest. We're also coming out of a place that used to have technology for red light cameras. And then when I understand it was found unconstitutional by the state Supreme Court here in the way it was done, we have proposed things to make sure that we can use the technology, and I'm hoping getting it over the finish line, it started with last administration, that we do get those red light cameras, we do get those type of things, because I believe not just in the city of St. Louis, I drive around this whole region. I feel like I'm going backwards when I'm on a highway in Illinois, and I'm doing 60, 65. And I see it when I'm out in the county. The amount of cars I counted out when I had to go wait for my child, and when he was doing rowing, I went to one of the stores out in the county, and I counted 14 cars that had expired plates and or no plates in the county. This is a regional issue. This is a behavioral issue. And then when people are coming in, we are actually towing cars for the last couple of years. We go year-round to make sure that they know we're out there. We are downtown. Do we get it right all the time? Do we have to be somewhat reactionary? Yes, when they do show up, we are going to be there with our discretionary resources to help those district officers out. We got mobile reserve, we got anti-crime, we got SWAT, we got all these other units that were in a coordinated way, and we talk about it every weekend. We talk about it going into the week. We talk about it during the week. And, the amount of cars that we've towed, and, there's an issue with noncompliance as far as people pulling over for the police officers. But if we can get that technology back, and we just talked the amount of officers, so our main job is answering calls for service, right? And then everything else is a strategy around that, and we can do both. But what I think we have to continue to do, there have to be, and we've worked with, we worked with the NAACP. We've signed MOUs, myself and the chief from the county, about educating the public the dangers of noncompliance when you get pulled over, doing the type of things that you talked about. And we have brought it down, but to a place where it's utopia, no. But I think if you get those red light cameras, people that wouldn't ordinarily do this type of thing, the behavior, I think, feeds off each other. And you get people that you wouldn't ordinarily run for that light or run through a red light or stop and then go through. I think if we get that, that'll start to calm the people that might not have done it, and then there's less people to go after that would just not do that. So it makes it more manageable, changing behavior. And when it comes to these dirt bikes and everything, this is something that's always been on our radar, but it started picking up more this year. So when we saw it, and it's a phenomenon with other chiefs in other cities, might be going across social media. So they started coming into our downtown this year. So we, downtown this year, Not that they haven't come in, but more, I saw it earlier and more. So immediately, regardless of what administration we're in, we made sure that we had a plan in place to make sure we do that. We don't need to be directed to do that because we got plans in place to try to curtail that. Fairgrounds Park, when they go meet up there, we're ready to meet them. We put barricades up there to make sure it wasn't easy coming off the highway. Keener Plaza, where they want to meet up. There's some places up in the 4th District on the north end by Broadway. We know all their meeting spots. We patrol them, we get on top of them, and then and then we send a message to make sure, we do have a new Director of Public Affairs for the last year. We've been doing a lot of it, but we haven't been able to, we haven't advertised and/or marketed what we're doing in a way that we're helping the public out, and we're starting to do that. So what you're seeing now is more proactive stuff on our social media, telling the public that might not know we were doing this in the past. So really, we'll adjust as they adjust to us, and I think we got to continue to do that. But if we can get those red light cameras in place and we start to do things like that, or even speeding cameras, I think that'll help us out because in other jurisdictions that I've been in, they've helped out immensely.
So you can seize the vehicle of people who are driving recklessly?
When felony fleeing, if they do things like that, or each in noncompliance now, within the state law, there's laws in place of noncompliance and running for the police. There's additional charges now that come a bigger penalty that's been advertised out there, and I think that's helping the police in these cases.
Yeah, because I think what we see sometimes with people is that if they, you can take someone's license away, they'll still get in the car and drive.
Right.
You have to take the toy away if they're being bad with it, right? So, and driving is a privilege, right? It's something that the roads are extremely dangerous already, but with people that are having no regard for other people's safety or lives, I often say that it doesn't matter if the murder rate is down if you feel like you're going to die crossing the street. Getting hit by a vehicle or a bullet is the same thing. It's the same result if it's traveling over a certain speed. And so, that's good to hear that you're taking strategies to address this. I know it's something that you heard when you came in as chief, and I just want to encourage, because I think it is part of the equation.
Yeah.
I still believe in the power of engineering and that we can slow the average speed down of cars through well-designed roads. But I believe that enforcement is necessary when it comes to reckless driving. And so I appreciate your efforts there.
And just, we do have a traffic division, and even when we do our CompStat, we have the high accident locations, the non-fatal, even fatal, where we're at. So each district commander has to take a look at that. Coming back from community meetings, we're seeing the new, well, they call them speed humps here, humps that are starting to slow people down. We're seeing the engineering of narrowing the streets. But I think also having a conversation with the new administration here, our new mayor, there's certain things that they're looking at in ordinances as far as how they can take vehicles if they're unregistered and/or plates, and how they can do those things. That's being worked out by a lot of people looking at policy and legislation, and certainly they're having conversations with me about that. And however we can get to a place that can improve on this, I'm all there. And because it's not just going to be about policing, we are a big part. We want to be a big part of it, and anything else that can help us do our job. Why we're trying to build the ranks back up.
Thank you for that. And I guess since you mentioned the expired plates issue, one thing I'd love to ask you about is, I think there's a lot of people who think that expired plates mean that someone's going to be driving recklessly, or they feel like every red light runner they see has an expired plate, and then it's kind of this confirming thing where they say, okay, people that have expired plates drive recklessly. In your experience and based on the statistics you see, is it any more likely that someone with an expired plate is violating the law in other ways, or that it just anyone in a car can do these things, and it's just that we notice the expired plates because they kind of stick out?
Yeah, it's the behavior of the individual. A lot of times if they have a fully registered vehicle, they know if that's picked up, that can come back to the registered owner, and maybe they would act accordingly because it can come back to them. What I see here in the state of Missouri, in other states that I've been in, 3 other states, you cannot pull a car off the lot, whether it's used and or you don't really see it used and or new, without having all your plates intact, registered vehicle, taxes paid, and I know there's a personal property tax here. So when you give the vehicle out, they get 30 days later, kind of some behavior, if they don't have the money, they're not going to register that vehicle. Or a lot of people do, but the ones we see that are out there with expired tags, and and I think the state legislature has taken up. I don't think that's going to go into effect till 2026. So I'm hoping the legislators in the state, they've looked at it, and I hope that helps in it. But it's different than any other place because of that personal property tax. Who's collecting it? Who's going to enforce it? Is it the car dealerships? I don't know if that's their job.
Yeah, well, certainly, Illinois does this where they do it all at the dealership and people, get those plates almost immediately. I don't know that Illinois drivers are any better than Missouri drivers, but, and I, for the record, I always say, well, when I see red light runners, half the time it's an expired plate, but the other half the time it's someone with a fully registered plate. But it's important, I think, that the state fixed this, and I'm looking forward to it because I think it'll make everyone's job a lot easier when we can identify vehicles of people who are driving recklessly.
Absolutely, Alderman.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Alderman Velazquez.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Tracy, for being here. Thank you, sir, David. I probably have a couple questions for the both of you, but I will try and keep it as short as possible. I think this is more for you. One thing that we've noticed pretty consistently with budgets is that there is usually a line item for salary saved or salary savings. Obviously, it sounds like that you take that salary savings and kind of put it into. It's not. I don't see a line item for salary savings, and to my understanding,
Well,
obviously you're using that money for overtime, but is there a line item for how much?
okay, so
Or maybe I'm missing it.
if you look at, and it should be your page 336.
336.
It's that's the, so there's a line there, and it is towards the bottom third. It's attrition, staffing adjustments. And it's
And commissioned, am I looking at that?
attrition, staffing adjustments, commission.
And that's minus 13 million and
Yes.
some change. So that's, again, it sounds like that's what we've been calling, what Paul Payne has been calling salary savings, which obviously we're not saving because you're using that money in other places, but that would be that number for the unfilled positions and attrition.
Yeah, that's for what I expect to have as unfilled positions during the year. So that reduces the request by that amount. And that amount has, I increased that amount because as much as we have tried very, very hard to fill positions. And we have been successful in bringing back officers who previously worked for our department. The problem is that we still have normal retirements and we still have people leaving for other departments or just leaving the profession entirely. I have to do payroll every 2 weeks. And looking at this pay period or pay date for this Friday, we have 40 fewer officers than we did last year, despite all the efforts we have made to try to fill positions. This is still a very hard job, or commissioned officer is a very hard job to fill because it is a very challenging position and there are compensation issues but that's across city government. We know we have compensation issues. So, but that's that's the savings.
And do you just have any sense of that number? How much of, I know it's kind of hard to guess attrition, but how much of that is those positions that have been consistently, that we've been trying to bring in more officers, and how much is retirement, sort of, or standard attrition? I know that's hard to, you can't really quantify that, but in your best guess.
Yeah. So we're going to lose normally 80 to 90 officers a year who are just walking out the door. The retirements have dropped. Okay, so we have fewer retirements now because our workforce has
Smaller.
gone down, right? So we don't have as many retirements. And I will tell you that we don't have as many like 30-year retirements, what I would call a full retirement. We have more, we're seeing more, retirements before that, that full retirement. And those are the most unfortunate because it's really awful to lose somebody at 20 years because that person's very well experienced, knows what they're doing, is a leader to others, and when they walk out the door either to another police department or to another profession entirely, that's a big loss to the department.
Appreciate your answer on that. One more question. I have to look at the page number it is, but can you just talk about the page on civil asset, or the forfeiture page and budget, and how you measure that, and how it looks like it's, I'm going to find it. It looks like it's gone up. The budget estimate has gone, the asset forfeiture fund, I'm assuming that's civil asset
Yeah.
seized properties. And that looks like it's on page 332. Can you just tell me how it looks like you're projecting something, larger. That number seems to have increased over the past few years. Can you just talk about how you arrived at that, and sort of why that is increasing so significantly, it looks like, or you're estimating it, or it's increased significantly, I guess, since FY23.
So when we budget asset forfeiture funds, we can only budget what we have on hand, and the reason there may be an accumulation is just because we haven't touched it because we're trying to build up money for various projects. But under the police board, what will happen going forward in the future is that the way the police board would operate is the chief would approve a project, and each individual project gets approved by the police board and then has its own little budget for that project. But going forward, that's the way, and we used to would have arguments with Paul because it'd say, hey, asset forfeiture guidelines say that the chief is the one who really is the one who can approve a project along with the board, and that, state government really isn't involved in that because of asset forfeiture guidelines say the chief law enforcement executive of the city is the one who's responsible for approving projects.
So I guess just so I can understand, so you're saying that, because I don't want to assume, it doesn't sound like you're seizing more assets.
No.
It's just the way there's some carryover, and then you're budgeting for specific projects that you think will happen that will be
Right.
using those funds from
And then
forfeiture.
Since we turned in the budget, the funding issue for the range came up. And so that money that I have budgeted, or that's budgeted, is about $680,000. It's going to be $680,000 less because it's going towards the range. And next year, we hope to upgrade PeopleSoft and also pay for sound thinking, and that will pretty much wipe that money out. So the accumulation phase will have ended, and we're going to exhaust that money, because really asset forfeiture has really slowed down. I think because politically in Washington, there's large members of both parties who aren't real fans of asset forfeiture.
Okay, great. And then my final, almost wrap-up question, not quite in honor of Mitch McCoy over there, but we're all looking at the budgets in different ways and kind of with our eyes focused on different things. Is there anything in both of your opinions, expertise, that we should be paying attention to, that we should be noting, or that you wish that maybe that we would be looking at instead of the things we are?
Mhm.
Finding new revenue sources for the city, because really, the reason we have such a large, we were talking about attrition or salary savings. The reason we have those in every city department and why there are so many vacant positions is because when it comes to salaries, the city is not competitive, right? And that's a problem, because it influences who we can hire and how long people stay. Because it's a shame when we turn into a training, to say as a whole, turns into a training facility for other employers, right? So really, it's enhancing the city's revenue stream is the biggest issue.
Great. Well, thank you, sir. I have no other questions. Thank you, Chief Tracy.
Alderman Devotie?
Chief, Dave, Mr. Chairman, first let me apologize for my interruption earlier. I'm the new guy and I'm still trying to figure out proper etiquette, so I appreciate your patience as I stepped on myself. Chief, it's also good to see you outside of the Fifth Ward, so thank you for coming in today. I want to focus my questions on personnel if I could. Chief, I know you mentioned earlier that we have at the moment 879 commissioned police officers. From the position of those that are street eligible, are actually on active duty, where do we stand? I mean, I assume, maybe I shouldn't assume, but does that number include folks that are on disability, medical leave, suspension, otherwise not able to work?
No, in every police department, it's the amount of commissioned officers, and then we have to take into account that some are on administrative duties, some are injured. But what we like to do is we put them back into administrative positions if they can come back to work till they're fully healed. And so we try to maximize that. We got a real-time crime center, so we can put people in there. And we also have a call. We have a telephone reporting unit. So when people can make reports over the phone and/or it's not a priority call, we give the option if it's a past break-in to your garage and nobody's still seen, would you like us to take the report, and/or if we still can send a police officer out. So we try to use them, but absolutely in every organization, you're going to have that amount of commissioned officers, but certainly you're going to have people out sick, vacation, regular days off, and then you got to work into your schedules a plan that still works for the city.
Understood. And I know you can't give me a specific number today. That wouldn't be fair to ask. But from an estimate, generally speaking, what percentage of commissioned officers would you expect to be eligible for service on any given date? 80%, 85, 90%, something else?
Now, the way I always talk about it, without giving away our operational strategies, because there are some people that are listening to us, and I try not to give away those things, but being as transparent as possible, when you do scheduling, you look for at least two-thirds to be working because you have to rotate regular days off. So when you run a schedule like the one we have, two should be on, working a 24-hour shift, and you break it into 3 shifts. That can give you a good idea of where they are. And then one-third would be off. And then when you use some of the discretionary resources, you try to put your shifts where there's higher call volume or when things are going to happen. And naturally, the overnights do not get those call volumes. So we make sure that we try to get the proper amount of people on. And then if we have to switch to back up from different districts or discretionary units, when roll call starts, and we'll make sure that things are answered. So you got to be flexible. You got to be able to move on this. And whether we were at budgeted strength or where we are not, you still have to operate your police department that way.
Understood, and I appreciate that explanation. That makes a lot of sense to me. If I could regurgitate for a moment to make sure my understanding. So you're essentially telling us that at any given time, you would expect for scheduling purposes that about 2/3 of commissioned police officers would be eligible for duty on a given date. Did I state that correctly?
Correct. But you also got to remember, we have investigators, we get units, we get juvenile, we get sex crimes, you get detectives, homicide detectives, non-fatal detectives that have to go out and investigate these crimes over a longer period of time to bring some of those people into custody. And then what we do is, when we have, like you heard me talk about anti-crime, mobile reserve, SWAT units, they're not just on standby. If there's things that are going on in different places or a necessity where we might be low staffed for a shift, we can move them around in the city to make sure our calls to service are answered. So just like a fire department can be fully staffed right now, but if they have a 5 alarm, they got to be bringing them from other stations. So, that's worst case scenario, but you have to be capable to be able to do that.
So when we talk about staffing, and I forgot if it was you or Dave, maybe perhaps both, that talked in terms of attrition. And I think, Dave, you maybe even mentioned, thought about retirement. My understanding, although it might not be correct, is that when we talk about full vesting or folks eligible for retirement, the number that we're typically thinking of is 30 years. Is that right? No.
Once you hit the 20 year.
20 years. Okay.
He was talking optimum, getting some of 10 more years out of that person for their experience, which I agree.
That would be terrific then. Okay, understood. Well, in folks that live in my neighborhood or officers that I speak with on a day-to-day basis talk in terms of the approaching of this thing that they refer to as the cliff, or this notion that we have a number of very, very experienced officers that could walk out the door at any given time should they choose to do so because of where they stand in relation to retirement. When we talk in terms of attrition, and I know that your department is working very, very hard on recruitment. You mentioned this class of 14, 15 officers that was just sworn in. The incoming class of maybe 25 folks that you suggested. How, even with those recruiting efforts, how are we going to keep up in the next handful of years? Should we have officers that are eligible for full retirement? And if they're retiring at the pace that they've retired at over the last 3-4 years, even with the best recruiting classes, how are we going to keep up?
Well, coming in this door, even when I took the interview for this job, I knew we were down several hundred officers. And we were coming out of the pandemic. We were coming at a time when it was fashionable to be detractors of the police. And I feel that was still a small amount of people that had some of the loudest voices, and that's not how the community as a whole feels. I think the officers got to know that as well. And then if there are some that are not doing the right thing, we got to make sure that we handle that accordingly, because even officers that see officers not happening, they don't want to be working alongside because it makes their job harder. And we have a responsibility to make sure we're putting the best product and the personalities out there. And overwhelmingly, it's a very small percentage that we all pay the price for. And when I looked at this, more people were leaving this profession, not just here. I have a counterpart in Minneapolis. They have a budgeted strength of 900. He's at 450 officers. They just put their raise up to $93,000 a year starting. Well, he's still having trouble finding people to get into that, and he's not going to have them out on the street till 18 months. We have a place in California that's giving a $100,000 bonus to sign whether you come from another department or you come into their department. They're having a difficult time. It is the biggest thing that I sit around. I'm part of the major city chiefs. Recruitment is our #1 crisis in the United States. But I see us turning the corner, and where I'm seeing this, and we're still losing to attrition, but we was using a couple hundred officers a year during that time, and when I came in, it was about 900, give or take what day I came in, 990 officers. In 2.5 years, we've lost just a little over 100. That was happening almost at a pace of 100 to 200 a year. So the officers are not leaving just the profession altogether and going to other police departments. It still happens, but people were leaving this profession before 20 to go to do a whole nother thing. We were losing officers to other jurisdictions because they felt they weren't supported here for a lot of reasons. And then they also were worried the pay, we were not competitive with the pay. So when you start to make those changes, one of the biggest things is, I've talked about it in 2023, in first quarter of 2023, last administration gave them one of the biggest raises that they've seen. I'm being told, I'm only here 2.5 years, but in some of the history of people being on the job at this time. And then another 7% raise. So that, and I think also with a change in when officers make an arrest now, that it's seen by the warrant office, and there's not 6,700 cases out there. It's all about morale. And then where you start to measure morale is now you're starting to see officers come back, and I told you 35 came back. That's promising. I wouldn't sit here and say, Alderman, we've turned the corner. We haven't, but we slowed it down, and I'm very hopeful that if we continue, part of the thing about state control, which, I'm on the record testifying against in Jeff City, but here I am leading a police department. We were told there'll be additional money to get raises to make us more competitive. I think it comes down to economics. So if that comes true, I think it'll make us even better to bring more people in. And I've heard some other officers say now they want to come back, first for all the reasons I talked about, and then believing that the pay will be competitive. Because we have a brand in St. Louis. Our brand is you're a St. Louis Metropolitan Police Officer. And a lot of people are proud of that brand, and they should be. And we want people to come back, and they have a lot of choices out there, sir. And we want them coming back here. We have one of the best training academies in the country. We have a storied police department. We have a good reputation. Every department sometimes has their hiccups. And we're turning the corner as far as what brand we have in the right way: professional, constitutional, fair, respectful police department. And it's going to take some time, sir. And I can't sit here and say it's going to happen overnight.
And I'm not asking you to say that. Believe me. And I agree with you. I think that there is a very loud, vocal group. But I know when I go to my 4 neighborhoods in the 5th Ward, and you know this, whether it's the Hill or Southampton or the 2 neighborhoods in between, the support for your folks and your department is overwhelming. And I hope your officers realize that. But beyond the morale.
Can I follow one thing up on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, you talk about the community meetings. Now, I've gone to a couple hundred community meetings throughout the city.
I know.
I will tell you that it's not just in your ward. I've been to so many community meetings that we've been separated for so long because of the pandemic and some civil unrest, that when we get the officers meeting with the community on these nightly meetings, the overwhelming support, I don't care what part of the city you're in, the majority of the people actually clap and they appreciate their police. So the 5th Ward, I'm glad it's happening here, but it is happening in every other ward.
I didn't mean to suggest otherwise. Talking about from my knowledge base. So believe me, I didn't mean to suggest otherwise. We see numbers. You mentioned a couple of departments across the country, California. I've seen information with respect to Houston. Even across the state, the Kansas City Metropolitan Police Department. The practical part of me says that we're not necessarily competing with those departments for officers. but we're certainly competing with St. Louis County, and beyond the morale, we're also competing with the municipalities, places like Chesterfield and Wildwood, Baldwin and Manchester, wherever it might be. At the end of the day, despite our brand, despite morale, don't we need the financial aspect to swing back around and help you fill your department out?
Absolutely, because every time we get a raise, they jump us and get another raise, and it becomes an economic game. And the good thing is when these officers got to go out to these other jurisdictions, they realize the type of police work where people need us the most in the city of St. Louis, they can do the most help. They start to come back, and that's why I'm swearing so many back in. And with the economics you talked about, if we can be the highest paid in the region, we can get back up to budgeted strength.
My last thing I'd like to talk about when we talk about the department's budget, and we've been hearing already this week a bunch about the 22%. Paul Payne talked to us about that. I'm thinking back, and my background is of a trial lawyer, and I'm thinking back to pre-2012 when I litigated cases involving the police department. And back in those days, the cases were uniformly defended by the Attorney General's office. I think, Dave, for instance, you made mention of city councilors. Things have changed quite a bit since 2012. Back then, we had 5 city councilors working with the police department. The expectation is today we would have 13. I understand things are in transition. I understand that even the transition chief hasn't been picked, and we don't know who the other members of the board are. But do we have an understanding as to, from a budgetary perspective, who's going to be, from a legal side of it, defending our department and working on departmental issues? In other words, do we expect that the St. Louis City Councilor's office is really going to be doing that work, or are we going to go back pre-2012 when the AG's office was carrying that load? Do we have an understanding?
Yeah, we do have an understanding. And how we get there, there's going to have to work through this. Immediately after we came under state control by the emergency executive order, when the governor signed it, within 5 days, the Attorney General, Bailey, and his team met with our team and also our counselors that are assigned to us through the city. They're assigned into our building. And, we had talked about that they're not under my table of organization, TO. They're actually assigned to the city. And that's why you see that $16 million, that's part of it being billed back. So in the meantime, stuff is already going to the Attorney General's office for review. Nothing stops. Lawsuits come in. There's legal things, subpoenas. So they're vetting it, but also working it through the AG. At a certain point, they'll probably have to end up signing people, or they'll have to subcontract that out. And/or is the subcontract out of people coming over that actually been working on our building for years that want to stay with the police department. So I think that's how that has to be figured out. But we are not going naked as far as making sure that we're represented. And if I could use the Attorney General's word, he goes, "You are our client." And that's what he has said. He goes, "Chief, you are our client. We got you. We'll work with this, but you know what? You're not going to be standing alone, and we'll figure this all out." But they already have been taking cases and advice, and the city has to work with that. I make the city council's office here at City Hall, and then also the ones assigned that I've been working with for the last 2.5 years. We're working together, and I think we just got to work this out.
Do you anticipate that as that transition happens, because of course do you anticipate as the transition happens that there will be a need for less city councilors to be assigned to the department once the AG takes over representing the department solely as its client? I mean, will we need 12 city councilors?
I don't think we'll need, I don't want to speak for them in the workload. We're evaluating the workload, how many people are needed. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes from, the ones assigned to us have to go to our city councilor here. I think they'll have to, by the load of work, identifying those things, and then having, just like here, if the workload gets too much, there's a team of lawyers here in City Hall working for the council's office. So they'll assist and when the work. Same thing if something gets, we've already pushed some cases that didn't even stay in the police department, whether we can handle it with the lawyers that we. It's already been pushed up to the Attorney General's office, and I've already had conversations with some of his assistants already. So I think that's the fallback, the safety net. It's there, sir.
Understood. Thank you for your patience, Chief. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Alderman.
Thank you, Alderman Devoti. I just have a few questions. I'll try to keep it quick because you've been now here going on 2 hours. Appreciate it, Chief. And we also have another committee after this one. So just a couple of things. I do want to make sure I'm on the same page, and maybe we need more information. You know, one of the things that Alderman Browning brought up was there's several spots in the budget, and I'll mainly be focusing on just budget things. There's several spots in the budget that just didn't seem to be utilized. You look at damage claims, 5,000, that didn't seem to be expended. Promotional testing, 300,000, zero spended there. We talked about the recruiting, about 100,000, zero spended there. Employee recognition award catering, you know, 18,000, zero spent there. About 5 in communication body camera services, which seems to be important, but it looks like 5% was spent there, 352,000, 390,200, and only 16,000 spent there. And I won't continue to go down the list. I am curious about the fleet capital that seems to have 1 million in that account and only 2,000 kind of spent there, as well as communication capital, 640,000, zero spent there. And the reason I bring some of these up, and you did maybe answer some of this earlier, budget person for the police department, is maybe there was some transfers, and this budget committee is not privy to seeing those transfers. I think we already just kind of get a snapshot of the budget, and sometimes a snapshot, other funds were spent probably after January and positions was filled. But it would be helpful, I think, from this budget committee to know in totality, how much, where is some, I think as we look at the police department, which is one of many critical departments in the city of St. Louis, that we want to know from the budget department or the budget committee, the board, on how do we support these departments, and how do we maybe move funds to areas that can be critical to the police department or in the building division, where they may need that support. And when looking at some of these spots without knowing where the transfers happened, or if you move, since these are, I want to say, all in general, maybe general fund, don't know those transfers, how can we be best assist in seeing where maybe, in the past several years those funds wasn't utilized? Can we use that money for building division, which is also public safety? So just a comment there, but can you talk about the fleet capital or asset fund and what that is? Okay. Fund 552500.
552500. Yes, that's where we purchase vehicles out of.
Okay, and it looks like this last year there wasn't many vehicles purchased. It looked like, I'm looking at it right, 1,024,000 was allocated. Only $2,000 were spent out of that fund. Did it look about right?
Are you looking on page 308?
I'm actually looking on the online in the budget division far as expenditures. So I would have to look really quickly. So yeah, it's on page 308. It looks like you guys were allocated $1.something million. Do you see that right there in FY25 budget? It's at the bottom of 308.
Okay, I see.
Line item budget.
Yes, I see the, okay, 308. Yes, I see, for fleet capital asset for FY '25, the adopted budget
Uh-huh.
is $1,024,000.
Yes, and you only spent $2,810 is what I'm seeing on the website.
I don't think that's correct.
Okay. Was there a lot of vehicles purchased, I guess, this year?
Well,
Let me just. So Chairman, we'll get back to you on an answer on that question, so I want to dig into and answer it properly. But if we take a look at the vehicles, we are purchasing vehicles. You can see the amount of new vehicles are out there, the older ones have been put out. So the number of marked vehicles in the entire fleet is 330. The number of unmarked vehicles in the fleet, including covert vehicles that we use in some of our critical investigations, is 329. Number of vehicles on order are being outfitted, meaning they have to be put the package in, they have to be wrapped in the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department logos, and that's 22 patrol Tahoes, 4 K9 Tahoes, 6 Explorers, 4 Blazer electric vehicles, and they're currently waiting to be outfitted. And we got 31 Tahoes and 2 Silverados on order. So to see what the expenditures are, what your question, what we expect, why it only says that much, I think we have to dig into, find out on your question to understand it, and can we get back to the chair on that? But I want to-
Absolutely. And since I'm on the short time frame, I'm not able to give all the praise. You know, I appreciate your department, all the great work you do, but just trying to maybe figure out these small things that or line items to just figure out kind of where we are within the department to figure out how we can support. So I guess with this, so the recruiting thing, I know that was brought up, about 100-some thousand was allocated and 0 was spent. Does that sound about right, or is that a? Okay, so.
And we'll take a look. We are getting supported by other, by the St. Louis Police Foundation in some of these areas. So we'll take a good look at that as well, just to double check. But Dave is saying yes, so I'm going to go with
Okay.
Dave.
And I'm looking at, and the reason I asked that question, because I'm looking at the same website for, and the recruitment that popped up as 100 and 0 spent is on the same website as expenditures for the fleet card. So for that 1 million, but we can get back to that. But I want to make sure I give you ample time to answer that, so it's not like I'm just saying that and not being able to explain also.
We will get back to the chair, sir,
Okay.
if it's okay.
Just to get into some positions, and then I will wrap up. I know we talked about commissioned officers. So I'm clear, is commissioned officers, police sergeant, lieutenants, captains, major, those are all, when you say commissioned officers, is what you're talking about? Okay. So FY '25, it looked like we ended with just police officers, not rank and file of sergeant, lieutenants, captains, majors, lieutenant colonel, and our famous chief. Police officers, we roughly ended, as it looked like 609 officers, sound about right?
Yeah, once you put the commission officers and go up the hierarchy, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, major, lieutenant colonels, and then obviously the chief.
Okay. And looking to, and requested, and actually got the request, about 803.20 is what you're looking for in the FY '26 budget.
For what line is that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, page 336, it looks like your department requested 803 officers and was granted that. So I just wanted to see if that's about.
Yeah, and when we talk about 803, and then you're adding in the supervision, and that would bring the number up to the budgeted strength. And then when you took at a House Bill 495, they got some mandates that are in there up to 1,300 budgeted strength, and then they mandate up to certain amount in each rank, so within that 1,300 officers. So I'm kind of looking at 2 books here, because I'm trying to understand where we got to be with this and then what we're budgeting here. But the main thing is, we're under that number. Our hope is to fill, and if I can get up to either one of those numbers, speaking of the low, if we get to the lower, then we get to the other one as well.
Gotcha. And I know we're in a interesting limbo spot, because like you say, the state takeover and what we are mandated to do. I think a violation of Hancock, but I said it, you didn't say it. And the reason I asked that is because I know in FY, the year before, it was 847, and I know we took, about 100 officers for pay increases, which I think is critical, but we're still hovering around that 803 number of expected officers, but has continued to be a challenge, not only for your department, but nationwide, of, kind of getting up to that full capacity. So I was just kind of curious of that thought process of those amount of officers. And then I would say, last question before we wrap up. I know we talked about lawsuits. Alderman Browning brought up lawsuits and how those are paid out. If I'm not mistaken, it doesn't come from the police department. Maybe this is a Jim question. I think we put money in the budget for judgment settlements, which is paid through the general revenue, which is usually, if I'm seeing Jim, the finance guy back there, shaking his head. But Budget Director Paul Payne came the other day and said for ARPA interests, we put about 10 million just in judgment settlement. So typically, if we're sued, or if it's a lawsuit and the police department is sued, just want to make sure it's not the department that pays, it is the city that pays through a judgment line item, correct? Okay. Just wanted to make sure. And lastly, but not least, I know we talked about reckless driving for folks that you've come in front of this committee, or some of your amazing staff has come in front of the committee last session when the previous, now mayor, but alderwoman had legislation on reckless driving. I know there's some state language in that state takeover bill that actually has street takeovers that raise the felony or the charge for reckless driving up from a misdemeanor and then another misdemeanor to potential felonies. Be interesting to figure out what that looks like and having a conversation off record of how the police department will work with that, because it says a municipality can create their own ordinance. And I also recall that you guys already have kind of language on the books to handle folks that are driving recklessly if they have a suspended or revoked license. So outside of that, I appreciate it, Mr. Chief. I appreciate all the great work you do. I think you really turned the department around. There's always much work to do, but your intentionality in making sure that you're involved in the community, I think, is critically important, and always looking forward to figuring out how myself and the Board of Aldermen can continue to support this department.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Board of Alders. Appreciate it.
All righty. Madam Clerk, any acknowledgement of written testimony?
We have none.
Announcements from the committee? Besides myself, if not, I think already received an email. We will have the email scheduled for next week of all departments that will be in. I want to make note that next Saturday at 10 a.m. at the Thomas Dunn Learning Center will be one of our second public meeting to make sure that the community has input on the budget process. But I will not be remiss, again, if I do not thank each committee member for putting a lot of time into being on this committee to dive deep into the budget. With that, I want to make note, Madam Clerk, that the Alderwoman from the 12th will not be excused for the 4th day in a row. And I'll take a motion for adjournment. Moved by the Alderman from the 9th, seconded by the Alderman from the 5th. All in favor, aye. Opposed? Motion carry.